Palo Alto Unified School District. It's not, well, he doesn't start it till I start. We ready? This meeting of the Palo Alto Unified School District School Board may be coming to order if I have sound. I'm on, but not loud. Yeah? Okay. All right. This meeting, come to order. The board met in closed session and took no reportable action, and that is some sound. Let's get started with approval of the agenda order. Do I have a motion?
Oh, so moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Student board members?
Aye.
Aye.
Colleagues? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Okay. Approval of the consent calendar. These items are considered routine and will be approved in one action without discussion. If a board member or a member of the community wishes to speak to something, do you want to pull the minutes?
There's a typo. Is it worth pulling for a typo, or can we do it differently? Can we handle it differently?
Perhaps you can just say what the typo is, and if Vicki hears it, then she can,
It's like, why don't we say that Vicki needs to look at my comments in board operations? She'll read it and realize what the typo is.
yeah?
I believe so.
Okay, okay. If not, you know what, next time.
I'll bring it out.
You can bring it up. Okay, so anyone have anything they need to pull? No? Great. Student board members?
So I move the approval of the consent calendar. Sorry.
Excuse me, we had one correction on a job title on the classified personnel action items. It's been corrected and provided to you.
Oh.
We just think it's important that Mr. Zepeda retire with his correct title. So you'll see that corrected in front of you now.
That's this
Classified
one.
resignations accepted, yes. Thank you.
Okay, so the amended appointments and changes of status. Okay, you,
I move the approval of the consent calendar with this change to this item that Ms. Hendricks mentioned.
Second.
great. Student board members?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful. Okay. Moving on to open forum. If anyone would like to address the board on any item that is not agendized for this evening, you may fill out a card over here and put it, I have several cards, and place it in the place speaker cards here bucket, and we will get to them. It looks like right now we have 5 cards. And if you have any more, just get them up there. I will read 3 in a row so that people can work their way up to the dais. And again, you've got 3 minutes, and there's a little light right at the microphone. And bless you, when there's 1 minute left, it'll turn amber. Juan Manuel Prado, Maria Torres, Christian Holm. And I'm sorry, please correct the record when you come on up. Come on up to the microphone now, Juan Manuel Prado.
Thank you. My name is Juan Prada. I work for Migos de Palo Alto. We're a Spanish immersion preschool and aftercare program coming off of Stanford Avenue near Escondido. The purpose of our program is to help students enter the various Spanish immersion programs in the following cities: Mountain View, Redwood City, Menlo Park. Over the course of the last 12 years that we've been open, we've noticed the growing need for Spanish immersion aftercare, and many of the parents and students of our program who are non-native speakers. This being the case, many of these families need more tools and resources to help their children reach their true and full potential. But unfortunately, the district does not offer many Spanish aftercare programs to help fill this niche. We are here to petition the PAUSD to lend us a room at Escondido Elementary School so we can continue to nurture, enrich, and support the Spanish that the students are being taught there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think it's Maria Torres, then Christian Holm, and then Nohora Rodriguez. I'm sorry if I'm reading it incorrectly.
Hello, my name is Maria Teresa Torres. I am one of the lead teachers at Amigos de Palo Alto immersion program. And I am here today to ask the Palo Alto School District for a classroom at Escondido Elementary School campus. That way, we will be able to enrich, expand, and reinforce the Spanish language, especially to the little ones at Spanish immersion program, and especially to the ones that do not speak any Spanish at home. We are currently running a Spanish immersion kinder fan club, but there is not a program for children first and second grades. So we will love to have a classroom in Escondido Elementary School campus.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Christian Holm, Nohura Rodriguez, Michelle Law.
Thank you, and members of the board, thank you for having us this evening. And I represent parents that attend Amigos daycare, and we would like to, the Palo Alto Unified School District to consider the Amigos application for space to provide Spanish language aftercare on the Escondido campus. There is currently no Spanish language aftercare at Escondido. Despite it being designated the Spanish Immersion District School, Spanish aside, it's nearly impossible to get in the aftercare program that is there, the Kids Club. Kids have been on a wait list for up to 2 years, and when they were able to get in, they've only been able to get in, for a limited amount of time, like one day a week or so. As working parents, we need reliable, caring 5 days a week aftercare. And there's simply nothing on-campus option for us. The school grounds are fantastic with plenty of space for additional use after school hours. Tata and Amigos program are amazing. They are like family for the kids and families that go there. They're very caring, organized, safe, and create a fun environment for the kids. In addition, they have taught children additional interesting subject matter in the kindergarten program. They truly care about the kids and families, and have been the parents that have attended there have been asking them to expand their program for years. Would greatly appreciate your consideration to let them use space on the Escondido campus to provide after care for the children of this district. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nohura Rodriguez, Michelle Law, and Mary Jo Pruitt.
Good evening. My name is Nohura Rodriguez.
Could you bring the microphone down? Thanks.
I am the director of Amigos de Palo Alto, a Spanish immersion program. I have come here today to ask Palo Alto School District if they will let us use one of the classrooms at Escondido for the purpose of enriching the Spanish that is being taught to Escondido students. There is severe lack of Spanish immersion after the school programs since Kids Club does not offer any Spanish immersion. We have helped many families who have written back to us about how they wish we could expand our program and to continue working with their children. We think this would be a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for both families and students of Escondido Elementary School. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Law, Mary Jo Pruitt.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Law. My son is in first grade at Escondido. He is a great beneficiary of the Amigos de Palo Alto preschool and kinder after-school program. I wanted to ask for support for their program for two reasons. One, as Our family, my husband and I both work full-time. We need reliable aftercare. And when we had enrolled in Escondido, we signed up for Kids Club. And we were told that it's somewhere between a 2 and 5 year wait list due to capacity, Stanford, as well as sibling preference. And I kept calling, and I don't think we're getting anywhere on the wait list. And so the availability of on-campus after-school care is very limited. And having spoken with a number of parents and attended the principal's coffee, it's a topic that comes up regularly. And there really is no really other great option available. In addition, my son is actually in the English program. We didn't get into the Spanish immersion program. Escondido just happens to be our neighborhood school, and we're very lucky about that. But we would love to have an option for Spanish for him. Even though we didn't get into the Spanish program, we would like to continue that skill set for him. We're big proponents of Amigos. They are close by. They're known in the community. They run a wonderful program, but they just happen to be space limited in their current facility. I did some research online, and I know there are rental facilities, you can rent classrooms out, and I think what we're asking for is just some space for them to extend their program so that the community, the kids' community at Escondido can be enriched by their programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Jo Pruitt and A. Kilolo Harris.
Hi, I'm Mary Jo Pruitt. My daughter Giselle Pruitt attends Amigos. She's a kinder at Escondido. And reiterating what everyone has said previous to me coming up here and speaking, is that there is a huge after-school daycare issue for working parents. I will say my husband and I were so excited when our oldest was to start kindergarten, is like, yay, you know, we have this figured out and we still have 2 in daycare. And then it was like, oh my God, what do we do after 2:20? And we were so fortunate to find Amigos because, like Michelle had said, is the after school care at Escondido, you have to be you're on a wait list for 2-3 years, and we've still yet to be called. And then we came to Amigos, and just the experience that we have had has been absolutely incredible. I almost wish they could teach kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, and everything to my daughter and then to my kids who are coming up. But not only are they teaching them the Spanish that my daughter definitely needs, but the love and care that they have for her is just, it's amazing. When I go and pick her up, I know that she is in such good care. And now as we are coming to the end of this year and getting ready for first grade, we are super nervous about what we are going to do for her when Escondido gets out at 2:20. And I just honestly shows you how amazing Amigo is that they're coming here to, stand up and say, hey, can you give us a room to take care of these kids? Because they don't have to do that, but they have such a deep love for these children that they want to continue with the first graders and second graders. And I think that just shows how much they love these kids, and they genuinely do it because they want to give them an incredible opportunity to learn Spanish. So please consider, please, we love them and we love what they do for our community. And if anyone has their child, I highly recommend Amigos. It's life-changing. So thank you.
Thank you. A. Kilolo Harris.
Good evening. My name is Kilolo Harris Evans, and I have a first grader currently at Escondido Elementary School. His name is Fela Maceo Evans, and he is in the Spanish immersion program. And prior to starting the Spanish immersion program at Escondido, he also attended summer camp with Amigos de Palo Alto, which in their kindergarten preparatory program, preparing students to transition into the Spanish immersion program at Escondido. And there isn't another program like that. In addition to that, during his first year for kindergarten, he also attended after-school care at Amigos. And Amigos did a very good job of making sure to coincide what the children were learning in the classroom. They made sure to also emphasize that in their after-school care program. And I'm piggybacking on a lot of the things that the other parents have said, but first and foremost, besides how wonderful Amigos is, there is a real big lack of after-school care programs, and not only just for working parents, but for parents, as in my case, who have health issues and need to make sure and ensure that their child is in a safe and comfortable learning environment for care. In addition, though, is one of the things that I've noticed is the fact of Escondido being the choice program and Spanish immersion, that Amigos will be filling a niche that right now is currently limited to none, that it would make sense for there to be an obvious Spanish immersion after-school program at the school that at the school that's renowned for being Spanish immersion during the day. So it would be a normal, I think, transition for a lot of the students that are currently Spanish immersion students, plus the students that may not have had the opportunity to get into the program, but still want to continue to learn Spanish. So I think Amigos will fill that niche. But in addition to that is the fact that Amigos is a great program. It ensures not only though that the students are learning the language, but it also provides the students the opportunity to be acclimated to the culture and have cultural exposure. So it provides more of a full, well-rounded opportunity and experience for the children to get that true Spanish immersion culturally, in addition to the language. And I just, again, want to advocate that there is a really big void in after-school care and a Spanish immersion after-school care that Amigos would be to me, just the most likely fit. And I'm piggybacking and want to say everything else the other parents said too.
Thank you. We have one more speaker card, Ima Navarez.
Good evening, thank you. I have my first daughter was in Amigos since she was 3 and something, and now she, thanks to them, also she got a very wonderful preparation to get into the exam for kindergarten in Escondido. She got in, now she's in first grade, and her teachers really loved her, her level. It's Spanish first language at home, but still, the preparation from Amigos is really impeccable. So now she's in first grade, and it will be wonderful to continue that. We're talking about safety. We know that it is something familiar. We talked about the, she just mentioned the multicultural environment that she was already exposed in Amigos, which I love. And now I have a second little one, a boy, and he's in Amigos, and I would love to get the continuation through Escondido Spanish immersion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, that's all the cards we've got.
Madam President, may I just ask Dr. Austin? So obviously the board generally doesn't get involved with facility rentals, but is someone on the staff following up on this issue?
Yes. Dr. Novak looks excited, and we'll work through that with him.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all the people that came to speak on this issue. Really appreciate your coming and bringing it to our attention. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 4, reports. Let's start with the superintendent's report.
All right, I just have a couple things tonight. First of all, I was able to attend the performance of Guys and Dolls at Pali High School, and it was outstanding as always. Pretty amazing just to get in and starting with the facility, and then when the students start to walk out, you see the costuming and all the other things above and beyond the acting and the singing, and just a great group effort. Then, not to be outdone, I also attended the In the Heights performance at Gunn High School. Again, just top-notch performance, so many kids involved. More of the campus is being opened up, so even just entering into Spangenberg was pretty spectacular. So we're very lucky to have the facilities, the students with interest, the countless caring adults, and the funds and resources to make these things happen. It's just top notch. Next, we've got a victory party. You ready?
Yes.
This is good stuff. Last year, Pali High School, through their ELA testing of the CASP, in 2017, after all makeups and everything, tested 16% of their students. That, by the way, is not the victory part of this. Okay. In 2018, 19%, and in one day with no makeups, yesterday, hit 46%. So I would not plant the victory flag, but I would say that is a pretty amazing, yes,
Significant progress.
spontaneous applause broke out from the two people I asked to applaud. Thank you. And Mr. Paulson, thank you. All right, Gunn High School in 2017, 23%, in 2018, 62%, and yesterday, with no makeups yet, 69%. So both high schools, good efforts. As people will learn in life, showing up is half the battle to being successful. So thank you to the students and everyone's efforts on those early successes. That's it from our report.
Okay, thank you. Student board members, let's start with Mr. Prabhakar.
Yeah, so we had our student body elections last week for Gunn. We had a 70% turnout overall, which is great to see. A lot of students vote in the election.
Wow.
We also had our job fair last week, so students got to see some of the local jobs offered in Palo Alto in the Bay Area. Like Dr. Austin said, we had our musical In the Heights run by Gunn Theater. We had that running the past couple of weeks. It finished last Sunday. We also have our CASP testing this week, so all test takers at Gunn are offered a free barbecue, and they're put into a raffle where they can win prizes such as prom tickets. For the non-CASP takers, such as seniors, tomorrow we have mini courses. So a lot of cool things are being taught, like camping, playing the bagpipes, making chocolate, and doing taxes. So I guess fun things and practical things both being taught. And finally, we have our blood drive this Friday.
Oh, really? I should go to that. Thank you, Ms. Freer.
Okay, so this week we had our Latinx and Black Student Union clubs combine to make a giant mural that is going to be presented at the Palo Alto Art Center this Thursday, and then eventually will get moved to the SF MoMA. That is pretty interesting. As for the CASP participation, we had a new raffle for student parking permits, I believe, so it looks like that was pretty successful in getting the participation up. Our freshman class recently had an assembly from Sources of Strength to learn about wellness and how to get involved with wellness on campus, and that went pretty well. Also, we have our ASB elections this Wednesday through Friday, and we'll figure out the results, I think, Friday night. We have our prom asking competition starting for our April 13th prom. And then finally, for this week, we have our college letter rejection wall in full swing, where seniors happily post their rejections, and it's a way for us to all come together around being okay with failure, and it's just it's everyone's favorite thing. And then as for upcoming things, we have our YCS Service Day, April 22nd, change in our schools week, April 22nd through 26th. And finally, our sophomores are attending a challenge day, a Camp Unity-like event at school, I believe April 9th. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Can I just say one thing? Is that okay?
Sure.
I just want to thank the teachers at Gunn who went above and beyond to come up with special classes, the one-day classes. That was a really cool thing.
Nice. Thank you. Okay, on to the Elementary Saturday Math Academy. Ann Brown.
We got the broken one. Good evening. I'm pleased to introduce Nicole Manno, one of our teachers on special assignments for elementary. She is here tonight to give you information about the Elementary Saturday Math Academy. So I'm going to turn it over to Nicole.
Good evening. So as she said, my name is Nicole Manu, and I'm an instructional coach for elementary ed. And I'm here to share the Elementary Saturday Academy, or SABE, which stands for Student Academic Boost and Empowerment, that just recently started last Saturday. So as Dr. Argumedo presented to you a few weeks ago, the Elementary Saturday Academy program is funded by the Low Performing Students Block Grant. As a result, all 4th and 5th grade students that scored a level 1 or 2 in the math part of the CASP were invited to participate in the academy. During the planning stages, the TOSA team and Dr. Argumedo agreed that the shared vision of this program is to boost students' critical thinking skills by providing small group instruction and varied mathematical experiences. Ultimately, we want these experiences to be reflected in the CASP scores. The Saturday Math Academy meets from 8:30 to 11:30 at Fairmeadow Elementary. We have 6 credentialed teachers that co-teach small groups of students in 3 different classrooms. One classroom uses Bridges Intervention curriculum to provide targeted instruction based on the results of the NWEA and the Bridges pre-assessments. The second classroom incorporates an online problem-solving math curriculum called Dreambox. Dreambox is directly aligned to each student's RIT score from the most recent NWEA assessment. This classroom also incorporates small group math talks to strengthen flexible math thinking. Finally, the third classroom is a STEAM-themed engineering enrichment class, and this really brings math in action for the students. Tonight, I'm happy to give you the most recent update from our first Saturday Academy class, which was this last Saturday, March 23rd. We had an enrollment of 39 4th and 5th grade students from all schools in Palo Alto, and 9 are on the wait list. This means that the student-teacher ratio was 6 students to 1 teacher. We feel strongly that this small group number is very important for the success, as we are able to respond to the needs of the students with the greatest impact. Finally, this to me is the most important part, which is the positive feedback that we've had from the students and parents. Not only did we witness new friendships developing across the school sites, so they didn't just stick with students at their own school, they were playing and working in math with students from other schools. But we had several children who did not want to go home. They kept going back to the class, and we're saying, oh, we got to take you to pickup. Comments from the students ranged from, this is so much fun, I like to learn like this, and I do not normally like math, but this way of learning is fun. One parent was so excited, came up to us and informed us that their child had told them that they didn't want to wait 2 weeks to return to the Saturday Academy. So I want to share with you that we have 3 more academies that we are going to continue to work with the same group of students after spring break. And we also have a future plan of expanding the program because the grant lasts through fall. So we're very excited to give you this fantastic information about what's going on in elementary.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you. Do you have anything to add? Okay, great. Let's just see if anyone has any questions or comments. Mr. Collins, Mr. Darup.
No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Dauber.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah. Ms. Payton-Caswell.
I have 2 questions. One is if we have a 6-to-1 ratio and we have 9 kids on the wait list, we couldn't have a 7-to-1 in a couple of classrooms?
Well, yes. However, the wait list resulted after we had already taken the roll, and then parents were asking to come in later after we had already sent the invitation letters. And so once we were able to figure out how many students were going to attend on the first day, we realized there was only 3 more Saturday academies left, and the type of work and the assessment that we did on that first Saturday made it difficult for them to jump in midway.
Oh, so they asked after the academies had already started?
Yes, so there was a deadline with the wait list just so that we can begin to build the program and assess our needs as far as how many teachers to hire, what type of curriculum we need to provide, how is the structure of the program going to be. So once the deadline was met, we used that number for the enrollment, and then after the deadline, more and more parents were saying that they were going to be able to do it. And so at that point, we had to really assess whether or not we wanted to keep the numbers pretty low so that we could really be responsive to the students, and the fact that they've already missed the one day where we've done a lot of the pre-assessment and the work in developing this curriculum for the students.
So my suggestion would just be to think about if there's any way to handle that for next year.
Absolutely,
so-
that's on the plan, yeah.
Okay. But it sounds great. What you've done sounds very positive. If it's so fun and kids don't want to leave, how can we incorporate some of that into the regular day classroom so that kids feel like that in their regular classroom as well?
Well, we definitely, when we were designing this, we had in mind, we have to make this fun. These kids are coming on a Saturday morning. You know, we want to continue to keep them engaged. So part of, I think, the reasons why kids enjoyed this process or this day with us is because it was a very safe environment for them. And, you know, we had the small group, so we were able to have opportunities to have a real math dialogue with them and open up conversations at their point of entry and not feel lost in the dialogue that sometimes happens in the classroom when you have 23 students. So it gave them time to really think.
So Ms. Brown, if there's anything that we can get out of this to use in the regular classroom next year,
We
it
will
would be
do
great.
Yes, we will do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Fryer, do you have anything? Mr. Parker?
Nothing to add either.
Okay. I just was wondering, how did you go about inviting families? Did you mail out an invite to any one of the one
Yeah,
or two?
so we took of course, the student list of those students who scored level 1 and 2 in the math part of the CASP, and we sent out invitation letters. The letters then had gave details of what the expectation was, where the site was going to be. We've also provided busing for students that might otherwise not be able to get there on their own, as well as brunch is being provided by Palo Alto Food Services. So we've, Judy or Dr. Argumido has really covered all the bases in ensuring that no student would not be able to participate otherwise. So a lot of some of the parent feedback is this doesn't work for me at this time because my students or my child is involved in other activities. But is this something that might be offered in the future? And so we've definitely given them feedback that we are looking to expand the program and invites will be happening again.
Fantastic.
Of course, we hope that, that raises the CAP score, so we may have less students to invite, which is a positive thing.
One other question about Dreambox. Do they have access to it in between?
Yes.
Is it a license for the weekend school, or is it, yeah?
Yes, so it is a license that we purchased for the students who are involved in Saturday Academy, and we've all encouraged them. We've worked with the tech department, the IT department, to make sure it's a single sign-on process through Clever, so students can access it at home. And the good news is we can actually see the work that students are doing at home.
Yep.
And there are several students who continue to work for more than an hour over the weekend. So they're very excited.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thanks for the update. Thank you for all your work. And to Dr. Argumedo for pulling it together too. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, next, PAUSD Staff Housing Survey. Dr. Austin.
All right, thank you. I'm going to run through this relatively quickly. Everyone has had a chance to look at the actual survey. I just want to point out a few highlights for everyone. First of all, I think doing the survey was really important. It gets rid of some of our guessing. And in light of some recent articles, we can see that other districts around us are going in this direction of staff housing. So a few things. First of all, I'd like to thank Chris Kolar for his help in putting together and then putting the survey out and helping us to look at the results on the back end. Over 600 PAUSD staff members participated in the survey, which is really encouraging. Of those 600, the average commute was 75 minutes. That's round trip, not one way, but we had some as high as 300 minutes a day. I've learned some stories through this process about people who live as far away and maybe even further away, as Tracy driving in for jobs here with us. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to go to the San Jose Sharks game, which was a lot of fun, by the way. And I took the train down to the game at night, and that was very convenient and a fun activity. But sitting across from me was one of our employees. So I had a conversation during that drive down there on the train with the employee about what their day looks like. And it starts at 6 in the morning on a train, and by the fact that I was on the train with her at 6+ at night, that's what that looked like also. And then that piece of the trip ends with picking up her car and driving home from there and repeating that each day. And I know a lot of people are doing similar things, and you can say the train is convenient because it is, but that's also an expense, and that's by my calculation, 12 hours in between train trips after working a full day. About half of the respondents rent their current properties. About half are not satisfied or reported not being satisfied with their current housing situation. That might be true of all Californians, I'm not sure, but in this survey, about half were not satisfied. More than a third of those who responded were in their 30s or younger, so either in their 20s or their 30s. 60% indicated that above and beyond potential housing fix, like some of the districts are looking at, they would be interested in having some place where they could go that maybe we could even house, where people that wanted to rent rooms or additional properties in town would be a place that they would like to go find these opportunities to have below market rents in town. The bulk of those who responded pay between 30% and 60% of their gross income on either rent or mortgage payments. 60%, this part I really want to hit home on, I only have 2 pieces left. 60% indicated that they may leave PAUSD within the next 5 years due to housing in their commute. That's a pretty staggering percentage. 94% indicated a desire to live closer to where they work. And then the qualitative piece of that were all the things that we might have hoped to have seen. They want to be here to spend more time in their community that they serve, and attending events and working with their colleagues before and after school, being able to arrive earlier, stay later. Those are all positives. So I'll stop for now. There's no action required at all. This is just a report on our survey.
Thank you. Ms. Baden-Caswell?
Yeah, this is always good to have some data to back up our conversations. Can we cross-tab this? Can we cross-tabulate it to take a look at, are the people that are having the long commutes the same ones who would be willing to pay a certain amount, or can we do that kind of thing?
There's a couple things. One point that Mr. Kohler asked me to make, I blatantly forgot, I'm sorry, is that this survey was not the same for everybody. So if you answered yes for some questions, it would take you in a different direction. So already we know that if some people indicated early on that they had no interest, they're not in the other parts of the survey. But can we cross-tab, Chris? There's head nod, yes, absolutely.
So if we cross-tab questions, send them to you, and you'll send them to Chris?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Collins?
Thank you for that report. And I urge people who are interested in this to look up the survey itself in the board packet. I think this is really significant. It exceeded my expectations, and I'm mindful I saw there was a much smaller iteration of this about 10 years ago that showed significantly shorter commutes and significantly less interest in housing solutions. So I think the game has changed somewhat over the last 10 years, which isn't surprising given how the rent and housing cost situation has changed. So I was really struck that this was at the high end of my expectations in terms of likely demand. And I did want to point out, you alluded to, Mountain View Wisman yesterday or today announced a 144-unit project, $56 million commitment, working with a local builder, which would be the largest teacher housing project on the peninsula that I'm aware of. So, people are doing this. And I think it is, it may be time for us to kind of go from the exploring stage to let's think about it and assess stage to actually looking at specific proposals to see whether they actually fit our needs. I think we're probably not ready to make a commitment, but I think I think you really helped it bring it to a point where it's something that we should seriously consider.
Mr. Dart?
Yeah, I think that, last time we spoke about this, or some iterations back, we said, is this really a need in order to retain the best educators and the best staff? And I think clearly, based on at least my interpretation of the data, it is. And like you said, this is a regional issue. Other districts are moving forward, and if we're not actively moving forward with housing, then we're behind the 8 ball on this. So I echo Mr. Collins' sentiment of now being the time to move forward on concrete proposals, because clearly the need is here and the desire is here, and we need to retain, obviously, the best people in our district so that we can serve our students, and this is one of the ways to do that.
Mr. Dauber?
I certainly appreciate seeing the data. I think it would be useful to know what our experience is, because clearly we're seeing people reporting, real struggles with commuting and housing costs, and also tying that in their responses to, their interest in staying in the district or their ability to stay in the district. And so I think the question is, are we seeing that experience in our actual employee, recruitment and retention? Because really that's kind of the acid test for evidence about whether we're actually seeing this impact. So when we do exit interviews with employees, are we seeing a shift in the reasons why people are leaving? Are they leaving for reasons that, are clearly about, commute length or housing costs and those kinds of things? Because I think, this is a large step that we're considering taking, and I think we want to make sure that the evidence base for that is clear. I think, one thing I think we also want to think about is when I look at question 30 on page 12 of this, which is how would it make you feel if a colleague at work applied and was offered district housing, but you applied and were not? There's a pretty significant negative reaction to that prospect, but the reality is that that will be a common experience if we go with a model that creates a fairly scarce resource. So to the extent that we're doing this in order to address employee issues, which I think are real, we should think about the potential negative consequences of different arrangements and maybe look for ways that we can support, that we can address these issues that don't create scarcity in the course of doing that. I don't have ideas about what that might be, but I think there's complexity there. It's always surplus is better than scarcity in mind. I learned that in microeconomics. And I think, so those are my, that's my reaction. I think we need to validate and also take care with not sort of reading from this, from a problem to a specific solution.
Thank you. Ms. Freer?
I agree with everything that's been said, so I have nothing else to add.
Mr. Brocker?
Yeah, I think the 59% stat that Dr. Austin mentioned is really important, because if 59% are considering leaving the district within the next 5 years, that obviously makes this a very time-sensitive issue. And I think this makes the demand that we were talking about for staff housing just a lot more clear.
Thank you. Thank you for this. I found the data really interesting. And I noticed the same thing when you commented on the fact that if you applied for housing and weren't offered it, but someone else was, and the follow-up question, if your colleague was offered it and you were not interested in it, and everyone's very happy for those teachers. So, I think we know not everyone wants it, but certainly we need to think about we're not going to solve that right here, but what that housing needs to look like and how much of it we're going to need. And like you said, there's more work to be done, but there's obviously that need. So I appreciate these data to point us in that direction, and I think we need to think about what those next steps really look like.
Could I just make one more comment? I think it would be useful to look at the distributions as well. There are some eye-popping, facts here, 300 minutes, Tracy, and so forth. But what we really need to, I think, be understanding is what is the distribution, what is the experience, in more detail than that, and we don't want to make policy based on extremes.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I asked if we could cross-tab the status, so.
Mr. Collins, did you have something else?
I agree with all the caveats on the data. I mean, this is a top-line summary of an imperfect survey, and I think we all need to be mindful of that. I also think, though, that in many ways, just from thinking about its, framing of the problem issue, it could significantly understate our problem, in that this is asking people who already work here, who by definition have already found some housing solution that was good enough for them to work here. The thing I worry the most about is 5 to 10 years from now, when a lot of our employees will be retiring, our ability to recruit people who can, of equal quality or even better, to take their spaces, given that the people who moved here 25 years ago moved into a different housing environment than the one that we are in today. So, one thing I'd love to see us do is figure out a way to assess in our pipeline how people think about housing decisions, because I think it's the big miss is all the people who apply for a job here or think about it and then look on Craigslist and then are like, oh my God, there's no way I'm going to go get a job in Palo Alto, because how could I possibly afford an apartment? And those are the people, those people 10 years from now. It's hard to do survey work to assess the attitudes of those people 10 years from now, but that's the group I'm most concerned about, because when we have 500 spaces that we have to fill with people who need to find new places to live, that could be a real challenge for us. So I think there's a lot of work still to do here.
Yeah, that all makes sense to me. I think that those are good points.
Great. Okay. Great. Moving on to our A to G student performance update. Dr. Austin.
I'd like to bring up Miriam Stevenson, Chris Kolar, and just when they're on their way up here, I want to thank everyone involved in putting this information together. I want to acknowledge the frustration that this information doesn't come together quickly, and maybe not as quickly as we would hope it would. But we wanted to make sure that the information we provided was accurate to the best of our ability. And the last thought before we turn it over is that it's also my hope that we can have a hint of optimism for our future, that not only have we got our arms around this in a better way, but that in the future it'll be more routine, more standard business, less of an ordeal to get to, that these reports will come to you each October, just as standard practice, that the work will take place largely over the summer to prepare for these, and that the system will be less likely to allow for students to fall through the cracks or to have the potential of that happening. So I look at this report in a couple ways, but I would summarize it in saying I'm optimistic about our future and a new way of attacking it. So, Ms. Stevenson.
Good evening. I'm Miriam Stevenson, the Director of Student Services. One of the roles that I play in our district as a former school counselor actually is to be the district lead administrator attached to the school counselors. So it's in that vein that I'm attached to this project, and I'll be that hint of optimism that we insert into this work. So that said, I joined Chris Kolar from the Director of Research, Evaluation, and Assessment to present the findings of an agile design team composed of administrators and high school counselors. We'd like to thank that team for their commitment to improve the student experience and their willingness to look at this work that's been highly analyzed with fresh eyes from all aspects. So our team was tasked to complete a deep analysis of student A through G outcomes in order to identify patterns and opportunities for immediate improvements to our systems and practices. That said, we know that tonight's report is the latest leg of the district's longstanding effort in this area. We hope that this analysis provides a more complex look at those same things and answers some long unanswered questions. Our current work looks at graduates in the class of 2018, which is PAUSD's first graduating class under the revised requirements approved by the board in 2010. For the non-counselors in the room, these requirements can be met with grades of D or higher, while the same courses must be completed with a C- or higher to count towards A through G for UC or CSU eligibility. The focus of our current project was first to review all transcripts of graduates classified by Infinite Campus as non-A through G complete. The second, we were to identify and address processes that contribute to these transcripts being inaccurately classified as not meeting A through G. The third piece, and I think the most important piece of this work, is then to analyze the demographic and performance data of students who did not meet A through G and utilize that data to identify what we can do to help more students meet A through G. So you all have the report. I trust that you had fun weekend reading. So we're just going to focus on the high level kind of takeaways from our report and our next steps. So first, we want to honor that previous efforts to align Infinite Campus with UCOP, the portal that holds all things UC for course approvals, have reduced the number of transcripts needing manual review, and this has narrowed even the systems analysis that we had to complete. So I want to honor that. That's a huge success, and we want to celebrate that. Some critical areas that we do want to focus on include early and frequent outreach, education, and planning for meeting A through G requirements. This includes communication around the comprehensive counseling and support services available to students and families. We are seeing a gap between the knowledge of what's available and the utilization of those counseling services, and we want to bridge that gap. This includes methods for alerting both, or actually everyone, students, parents, staff, and counselors for early intervention when concerns arise, whether they be about grades, attendance, behavior, or other indicators of concern. We want to expand the existing uses of tools like Naviance to help build understanding around post-secondary college and career options, and for our students to have a better sense of what fits them the best. A key touch point we discovered from this process and this work that was really explored but often speculated about was that senior year is a critical touch point in terms of educating students about holding their grades for that year, as the majority of our students who had Ds or Fs or passing grades that led them to not be A through G compliant started that year fully eligible. And some of them chose other options, which we want to note are acceptable to the colleges that accepted them, but at the same time do make an indicator in our A through G completion. This is a critical area, so we have discussed equity and disproportionality, and our patterns, and what we discovered from this analysis is that those patterns are echoed in our report. And we need to look at whether or not, well, actually first, what interventions are being utilized and whether or not they're effective, and what else we need to explore as opportunities to support students and all of our students meeting A through G or whatever their pathway is of completion. So in terms of next steps, our cross-functional team is going to continue to meet and focus on ways that we can make sure that A through G attainment and reporting can be improved. This includes addressing the anomalies that we have not yet been able to solve, which is a handful, and outlining clear and consistent processes for managing mixed transcripts. And similarly, looking at complex report outcomes for the providing those complex reporting outcomes for the graduating class of 2019 in October. And so that report will mirror the similar analysis that we completed this time. My last note is more of an editorial comment. It's not included in your report, so it's probably the best note. Finally, while this is really important to be transparent with our student data and to bring it to community and the board's attention, the power of this data really lies in bringing it back to our school teams. and making it the focus of our instructional leaders' work, as well as the counseling departments and our coordination of student services teams that really need to reflect on these patterns to better inform their next steps about how to support all students in achieving A through G or their post-college or post-high school plans, whether that be college or career. And I do want to highlight as a school counselor that those don't always align. Okay?
Thank you. Can I just ask a clarifying question before we take cards or go around? In the report that you gave us, those first percentages of meeting A to G and not, that's what's on CalPads, right? That's the published number before it's corrected, correct?
No, those are the numbers post-correction.
Those are the numbers post-correction.
Yes.
Okay. No, so the 2018 graduates, 72% of Asian students met A to G, 28% did not meet A to G. Right?
So while updated to CalPads, so also new this year, just important in terms of procedures, is that this is the first data from CalPads that's going into the dashboard. So new procedures is that once submitted in the first submission, different than previous submissions, which could be updated, that what's on the dashboard stays fixed until the next round of the class. So CalPads information has been updated. However, the dashboard is static with the first submission. And so you will not see changes to the dashboard until we submit information for the next class.
I guess, so here's this 2018 graduates, 72%, 28% met, not met, with an N of 374. Is that, once we went through and said, these 72 students actually met A to G, and then we found out that undetermined data error actually met A to G, is that 72% after that we found a bunch of these kids actually did meet, but it wasn't in the data? Or is that before?
I would want to see it in front of me, but I don't believe, I believe it's the final count.
Yeah.
I'll bring it over.
It says it was revised January 2019.
Okay. Okay. Yes, the January 2019 was when we submitted the final update to the CalPads data set that's used for these calculations.
But is it the same as on the page before? Does it account for those?
I think it's actually the page after.
It's the page after.
Right?
It's the page after,
The page
and we can speak
after.
to that. So there have been corrections made based on that chart. That
Okay.
is true. However, not all things in the chart have been yet addressed. So there's still some elements that we have to work with CalPads on because they have a determination related to some of these categories. So for example, they met A through G. There are people who exist in our dual enrollment and alternative placement and some of our other categories that will move out based on their summer school completion or further analysis. So I would say that that information reflects the top 4 categories of that chart.
And to be clear, now that I see them side by side, the question makes more sense. I will generally not report anything that is not the canonical publicly published CalPads data. So what you see on the previous page is where we started. And for example, the course coding, the 72 gun students, that's the vast, if not almost all of them are going to be switched over to become eligible, but that has not yet been made or changed or corrected or submitted to the
Okay,
state.
that's what I wanted to know.
This chart doesn't match this chart.
Well, they match, but we haven't made any corrections to the first one.
Okay. All right. Do we have any cards for this item? Okay, I'm kind of surprised. Okay, wonderful. Mr. Dauber.
Let me see if I can sort this out for myself. So I'm interested in first in understanding kind of what the real A to G graduation rate is, sort of post-correction. And so what I did in order to try to get an estimate of that for my own purposes was to start with the numbers that you reported on the second page of the memo at the bottom. 72% of Pali students and 59% of gun students were reported as completing UC CSU A to G graduation requirements. And then I said, okay, well, that's an understatement of the actual A to G graduation rates, and the understatement is captured by the first, I guess, 5 rows in the chart on page 4, right? And so if I were to take those additional, I think there's 220 or so students in gun in that column, and I think actually only 60 of them, according to the chart here, didn't meet A to G requirements once we fix various data problems. So the actual A to G graduation rate for gun is somewhere in the mid-80s. I didn't calculate it exactly. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, you had good intuitions on what to add together to calculate that. We did not, because it's going to take some actual intervention, and because we did not review the transcripts case by case to specifically make these changes, we haven't put them into the system yet. It would be the vast majority of the people in categories 1 through 5 would in fact be revised.
So I just kind of roughly
1 through 4.
1 through 4, 1 through 5.
I thought it was 5.
I thought 1 through 5 because it says met A to G requirements, but
So 1 through 4, because grade verification is still something we need to explore with CalPADS. While it's honored for UC CSU eligibility to actually meet the definition of CalPADS A through G eligibility, we need to verify. This is still a new process for them. So there's several questions that the team has sent out and is waiting for verification. So these students, it's important to know that all the students through 1 through 5 did not meet a hazardous outcome in terms of their UC or CSU eligibility. That's important. But there's still some splitting of hairs for category number 5, because you can get grade verification according to this CSU UC process, but to be able to indicate that for our state reporting on the dashboard is a new element that still needs some clarification.
okay. And that's a fairly small number in relation to the overall set.
Correct.
So I would conclude from this that our actual A to G graduation rates at both schools are actually fairly similar to each other, and that they're somewhere in the mid-80s.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Additionally, that same point in terms of A through G is one object, or one topic, but CSU eligibility is another, is an important distinction. And while you might have issues with an A through G checkbox for the definition, you will still meet all of the requirements to be eligible and achieve acceptance at your desired school.
Okay. I'm not sure I understood
That's
that
okay.
exactly, but I think it's probably fine if I didn't. There's a couple of things that I noticed that I wanted to follow up with you. So is it fair to say that the error rate, if we consider 1 through 4, or at least lines 1 and 2 to be errors, the error rate at Gunn is a lot higher than the error rate at Pali? Is that fair?
That's correct. And a lot of that is attached to the course coding related to a handful of courses, about 6.
Okay, so you've identified those and you understand what happened, and these were basically a small set of courses that, okay, so there's no systemic difference in particular. Okay, these are just, I also noticed that, I think that's encouraging in the sense that, well, first of all, now I really appreciate the fact that now we are getting an understanding about what the actual number is. Because we've struggled with not knowing that number. It's good that it's not, in the 60% range, that it's in the mid 80% instead, although there's still a significant number of students who are not graduating A to G eligible. But I think it's really good to at least understand what's happening. Turning to the kind of question about, well, what is the cause for those students who are actually not graduating A to G eligible? I'm struck by the fact that for about half of them at both Gunn and Pali, were A to G eligible until the senior year, and then they fell off of eligibility. Is that right?
That's correct.
Can you talk about why that is? You mentioned one possibility, which is maybe that their college didn't require A to G eligibility, so they didn't feel a need to get there. But if I look at these, at the reasons for these drop-offs, they're about failing classes. So it seems a little peculiar that they would fail a class because their college didn't require A to G.
So one of the key things, and this is a practice that we've uncovered from this, is the D. So you can not fail a course and get a D. Counselors advise against anything less than a C so as not to have your admission and acceptance revoked. One of the key things, depending on which school you've selected as well, is a technique of using a pass to get credit, a D to get credit to maintain that acceptance. The failure would be of concern, especially depending on when that happens in their college and career experience, right? Their college experience or their application process. But we have seen a use of the pass or choosing to get a pass grade or choosing to get a D grade in order to have that second semester easier by students once they have some certainty around where they are going. So that is both a technique that's employed to manage kind of expectations, workload, to still fulfill the requirements to get into the college of their choice.
So it sort of limits, that to some extent limits the headroom for how much progress we can make in sort of
I think
closing the gap.
education around the hazards of that or possible implications, but also I'm more concerned about students who had multiple Ds or Fs along their whole pathway. Those are the students where they're not, there's a lot of options available to the first group of students. The second group of students, I have concerns in terms of how soon were they identified, what types of supports did they receive, were those supports effective, how many attempts did they make to get credit recovery, because that tells us a lot more about our support structures and whether or not our supports are meeting the actual need of students.
Not everyone has the full kind of historical context on this. I was not on the board when the board adopted this graduation requirement in 2010, but I was definitely engaged and advocating, as were many people, for the change. And I think the sort of theory was that we would creating this graduation requirement kind of shifted the burden to the district of helping students graduate college ready, as opposed to having the burden in effect be on the student to do that. You're nodding. Is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't disagree. And I just wanted to add one thing to Miriam's commentary, which is looking at like what courses these Ds and Fs are earned in. And I know and as an example, we have instituted like an Algebra 2 restart program for students because that's the completion expectation is completion of Algebra 2. Are there other courses for which we should look at and develop these kinds of restart programs for kids who are farther down the path and need some kind of intervention like that? So I think that's the depth at which our counselors and this team is looking at the data and the information in order to try and help students earlier.
Yeah, and I guess my comment is that I think that the strategy worked to the extent that there's a lot of attention clearly being focused on exactly why A to G, why some students are not completing with A to G, and I don't think there was anything like that, before this started. So I think that's been effective. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Payton-Caswell.
Well, first of all, I want to thank this team for doing this work. You probably were sick. Chris was sick of hearing me ask for this report. So, and part of the reason is I was here when we decided that we're a public school system and we connect a public K through 12 and we connect to a public university system. And so when students exit, they should be eligible for the public university system. If they choose to do something different, that's their choice. But, it's hard to know when you're in 9th grade what your path's going to be. And so we didn't want to have what we had at the time, which was that some kids were just locked out. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, the ones that were locked out tended to be more heavily socioeconomically struggling anyway. So I look at this now, and I think we really do need to focus on the multiple DFs, and I'm encouraged to hear what Ms. Ofac said, is you're trying to figure out, are there particular classes that we have where kids are tripping up, and it's the same, if you look at the breakdown, it's the same demographics of kids, and it's the same classes. And I know that in some other districts, I've said this before, there's some pre-teaching and second teaching on particular topic areas that are tough. And we need to know what those are. I think that the urban myth is it's English, and I'm not sure that's true. It may be partially true because we talk about senior year in English, but what are kids tripping over in the first couple of years of high school? And how do we find that and address that? I think our history has been a lot of general support classes rather than very targeted specific ones. And that might be something we want to talk about. I'm very encouraged, Miriam, that you're looking at this and that we're looking at this overall and not, individual departments only or, just each school separately. I think that that's the only way we're going to make some progress. When we started this, I know that we went around school to school and there were some small group discussions. And I remember being shocked to hear that many families had no idea what the A through G was. And I think we have to assume that any kid coming into 9th grade, their family might not know. And if they're transferring in, their family might not know. So that we need to continue that education effort.
That's a different project and report that we'll be doing.
Okay, okay, but I think that they're connected.
They are.
Is there something that we're liable for if we've given numbers that aren't correct? Do we have something that we have to do to make up for that?
I'm not the data
Wow, that was.
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing because it's funny. I just want to make sure that we understand what our liability is on this.
I'm not sure what, liability in the sense of people claiming damage. What I think that we have learned, and it was not really me becoming sick of the questions as much as the frustration of not being able to answer the questions. And now but that was one of the things I thought was probably going to come up tonight, which is, well, what does that mean about all the previous A to G reports? And what I think we outlined here was that we had to go very deep and look at everything that everybody's doing along the way to figure out exactly how we were coming up with numbers. And as you can see, when we reached the end of that path, there were a lot of changes that we needed to make. Now, does that mean that we'll retroactively go backwards in time and update things? Probably not, especially because this being the first graduating class to go completely through, the requirements of the way that we measured the other classes prior to this may have been using different criteria. What you have also seen in this report is that as recently as January, we have updated the CalPAD submission, and we'll continue to do that as long as we can as we begin to make changes. And even more importantly, we're very excited that this is going to change the way that we go into the end of the year for the class of 2019, because we know exactly, we know what we didn't know before, and that's going to give us a chance to have a much more solid set of numbers to report.
What does it exactly mean? I know it's a very small number, but grade or course validation, what does that exactly mean?
Precisely. Well, so I know Sharon's Googling the precise definition for you because that's how amazing she is. So course validation is a process by which, so if you earned, and this is just an example, please, my counseling skills are a little rusty, a lower grade, so a D, for example, in a course, there are certain subject areas, including world language, some areas of math and science, where you can take a higher level course, or you can take the same course and complete the second semester at a higher grade. And the CSU-UC system recognizes that higher grade as indication of mastery of that first semester where maybe you didn't have things all together. And so they would give you that completion and not require you to have a C for that semester because of the grade verification. It's typically around subject areas where your mastery later on demonstrates your prior knowledge that you could have been able to demonstrate in that first semester of learning.
And so that's that's sort of like going back and challenging that, and then it goes up? That's how that works?
How it works is it's in the application process that the verification is honored, and this is why I put a little asterisk next to that section, is because with CalPAD's new processes, according to the dashboard, they don't really have clear guidance for us yet on how that bucket should be managed.
Okay, it's a small number, so I'm not
Exactly.
that concerned.
Right.
There's another number that's not that large, but it's a policy question for me.
Okay.
And I'm looking to actually our superintendent on this. I don't know, you can't hide in that suit. I didn't mean that in a bad way. I just
It was a
meant that
compliment.
you don't blend in. Okay, I probably should have said that first. Having the world language requirement met by other means, is this something that we need to talk about, what we really want to happen? Because we want every child to have 2 years of a world language. But if we don't teach a world language that they're interested in taking, or they're interested in taking a world language that we don't teach, and they're able to find it somewhere else, do we need a smoother way to do this? It feels like we've been caught up in this for years.
No. I did some research on that after talking to you. Students can do that now. They just have to receive pre-approval from their counselor. So it's already, there's already a road to it. Thank you for asking the question, though. It led for me to have to go figure this one out too, but with pre-approval, they can already do exactly what you're asking.
So what we have here, these numbers are people that didn't pre-approve, is that?
Not entirely. So that group can be made up of students who choose not to take coursework and take a test that's recognized by the CSU-UC system to acknowledge their mastery of subject. Some constraints around what you're discussing include what subject matter tests are offered and available and recognized, and what languages that system will recognize in terms of being a world language. So those are two things. You can take the AP test in Chinese, for example, and use that to count as your world language requirement, so you've met it by other means, or it's coursework outside of our system.
Do we anticipate that we will have a process that better accounts for this, or will we always have a gap like this?
So currently, we do expect to have a process. The current process is a notation made on the transcript by the registrar, which doesn't click a box in Infinite Campus. I don't know how granular you want to learn about the nuances of Infinite Campus. I look at Derek. But that is one of the processes that we're looking at, of how upon that being entered into our system or received by our registrar, how we can indicate in the Infinite Campus system so that it's not a notation, but it's an actual queryable data field.
Okay, I didn't need to know the whole process, but thank you. We'll have a cleaner process.
That's how closely we looked at it,
Okay,
yeah.
we shouldn't expect to see this gap every year.
I will say, I think we will always have a certain number of students, because there's also, if you, depending on when you come, and if you've lived and gone to school in another country where another language is the primary language for a certain number of years, that can then qualify as your world language completion. So I think we'll always have some manual review of a percentage of the transcripts for world language specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Collins.
Thank you for the report. I don't have any questions. I have 5 quick observations. One is that I did the same math that Mr. Dauber did. I got 83%, which seems neither good nor bad. I think the most important thing is that it establishes a baseline, because the whole point of this is that we should be moving the graduation rate and the A through G completion rate up over time. And I think now we are finally, for the first time, at a point where we have the baseline, and we can look forward to next year to seeing how the line moves. It does seem to me, again, echoing Mr. Dauber, that we did, I looked back at, I do remember when this took place in 2010, 2012?
I think it was 10 when we talked about it.
And then 12 maybe when it got done?
Maybe when we voted on it.
Yeah. Is that the major concern, or a major concern at the time, was that there were a group of kids who were taking basically easy substandard courses that didn't meet A through G requirements. And so they thought they were getting the education that we committed. Their parents thought they were getting it. We were graduating them, but in fact, they weren't getting an education that enabled them to access our colleges. And so we were fooling them, fooling their parents, and probably fooling ourselves in terms of the quality of the education we were giving them. My sense is that while there's still issues with this data, and 83 is not 100, that practice has substantially been reduced, maybe stopped altogether, which I think is the issue with most organizations isn't whether they have problems, it's whether they have the same problems that they had before. And it does seem to me that we've made real progress on that problem, which is, I think, an important step forward. So that's observation number one. Second is, I did want to reiterate what you said, and just plainly and directly, that no students were, it's like no pets were harmed in the execution of this movie? Or
No animals.
no students were harmed by these coding errors and data errors. The UC CSU doesn't care how we code any of this stuff and what we report. They look at each individual transcript by themselves and do come to their own conclusions about whether a kid is A through G qualified. Is that correct?
Correct. And students receive counseling based on their transcript and their grades to make appropriate decisions. So this is after the fact dissection to the state, and they do not
So
convolute.
people, I think, I heard from people, and I know there are people out there who are concerned that these errors may have hurt students' chances to enter colleges of their choice. Not the case.
Not the case.
Can I just follow up that point up? Why don't we just ask the UC who they determined to be eligible, and then use that number as what we report? In other
Not all
words,
our students
They have to
go,
apply.
so
They have to apply.
I see.
they have to apply, and they have, yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you. I think that's really important for the community to know that that wasn't, that no students were harmed. The third is, looking at our board policy 6146.1, which is our graduation requirement, I think this is something that I'd like to refer to the Board Policy Review Committee. I forget who's on it. It says specifically that the board recognizes the ability to attend university in California as a goal for many families, and this requires completion of specific coursework. For that reason, Palo Unified has established graduation requirements that meet or exceed these requirements. Period. That statement is not correct. And for no other reason, because you get D for diploma and C for college. Aside from the fact that as the policy then goes on to just straight below, there are alternative graduation plans. So I think we should make our policy align with our practice, since a policy is a promise. And I hope the Board Policy Review Committee will take that up and come back with something that meets what we're actually doing.
Yes.
Fourth, and something that I just want to gently amend something that Ms. Stevenson said. Well, I do think one of the probably the more important issue here is feedback to the students' programs and making sure that our practices change. I don't want to understate the accountability importance of having a clear metric that's communicated to the board and the community about how we're doing on this. This is, in some ways, our summative, what do they call it? Summative evaluation. If we're graduating these kids college ready, then we've done our job. If we are not, then we have to question whether we've done our job. So I think it is actually very important that we get this number and get it right and report it consistently and hold ourselves and the senior staff accountable. So I don't disagree with you that it's very important for the reasons that you said. I think it's also important as an accountability measure that we should all attend carefully to. And finally, I think there's a larger lesson here. I mean, and we've seen it a few times, but I just want to call it out. We need to carefully, when we implement something, we have to carefully focus on how we can actually track and ensure tend to the details of what we're actually implementing. There's a long list, and I won't list it out, of policies that we've done that we haven't done that, and we find ourselves years later still struggling with things that we thought were settled years ago. And I think that, I really hope our successors 5 years from now don't have to struggle with the policies that we decide to follow because they can't figure out whether they've actually been done or not, or what the results were, or things like that. So I think it's great that we're digging in and sweating these details, and hopefully we can do that work up front going forward. So thank you, appreciate it.
Absolutely. Mr. Doro.
Thank you for putting together this data. I won't reiterate the importance that all my colleagues have expressed. I know this has been, has a long history, the A through G report in this district, and its importance can't be overstated, as well as the importance of getting it right and signaling to the community and showing the community what the data is and making sure we all know what the data is as well. Specifically, I know that everyone will interpret this data differently, and you are all in the best position to actually do that. But I wanted to ask a question about one particular aspect of it, which was, it looks like 20 high school students got a D or an F in their second semester English courses in their senior year. Now, for those students, what is the remedial process? If that is, if it's my understanding there are 4 years of English required under A through G. So if they're failing their last opportunity to take English and to meet A through G on the English, what recourse do they have to make up their A through G eligibility if something happens and their last semester of high school, they suddenly fall short? Do we have something in place for those students? Because based on the description of the students who are most affected by these D and F grades, they tend to be historically underrepresented students, special education students. So what do we have in place to make sure that this doesn't happen?
So a couple of things there. With the pass or the D, there's much more leeway for the college to still accept them and not rescind their acceptance, essentially. A pass would typically have no impact. The student has to update their grades, but it buffers them in a way to shield in the way that you're describing. Separately, students who fail and need credit recovery or to redeem a grade that's a lower than C for college admittance can take that course in summer school, and that new grade would then take the place of the old grade. And those students are typically prioritized in terms of access to summer school courses. If for some reason their D or F is because of another thing that has occurred in their second semester senior year, maybe they took a break for hospital or medical, some sort of need, there are ways that they can get incomplete and finish the coursework afterwards as well.
In your experience, if a student does receive a D or an F in their second semester class, and that D or F determines A through G eligibility, or D, if they get a D, are UCs likely to exercise their discretion in allowing the student to remain admitted, or will they more often than not rescind?
So I'd hate to go on the record and state for any particular university what their acceptance ratio would be, especially there's a lot of qualifiers there in terms of the other things that balance out the applicant's whole application, as well as the selectiveness of the university. So I would hazard to make any statement that would say that the CSU or UC system has a certain rate of returning on that item. Counselors are supportive of students during this and give them what they need in order to communicate with their university, and that whole second semester is often focused on students who are showing indications of low grades, both before the progress period time, just checking that D and F list to counsel them against that and to support them in getting that grade up so as not to draw the attention of the university for any change in status.
Okay. And last question, do students by and large avail themselves of the credit recovery opportunities if this happens? And if so, how is that reflected in the A through G report?
That's a question we would have to look into.
Okay,
We haven't considered that yet.
thank you. Can we?
Okay. Well, I assume either you two will have a lot to say or not much to say. I don't know which way it's going to go, but Mr. Prabhakar.
So on the next steps, number 4, you mentioned looking at new features for Naviance. How do you think Naviance should be improved to kind of make sure students know about A through G?
That's a fantastic question. So Chris Kollar's already done some work on this in terms of focus groups, especially related to our parents and the parent education and outreach. There are a lot of the features and functionality of Naviance that we aren't making full use of or consistent use of. And so counselors are already in conversation and collaboration around looking at the different, because they have two different delivery models, if you will, but having more alignment in terms of how that program is utilized. So the program is designed to help students understand both their interest and skill set and to provide options to match them for particular colleges, careers, et cetera, along the way. It's a tool, it's not a solution, and how we utilize that tool, especially to do the outreach that was mentioned by the board earlier to families who, this is families like mine who didn't have a pathway or didn't know the boxes to check in order for that application process. This is the separate project I mentioned to you in terms of family outreach and education into middle school without, and I want to put a little cautionary statement on this. So this is all A through G college focused. We are also a district that balances that with career options and post-secondary options that don't directly lead to four-year universities. And that's not the desire of all of our students. And while we want to make sure everything we're offering them gives them every option available, I do want to put a little cautionary asterisk in terms of the story that we need to be telling the community, the board, and the school team is whether the outcomes from the students really match what they wanted. And Naviance is one feature that we could utilize to better help students determine that.
And if a student transfers like in the middle of high school, what's the usual process for making sure they know what the A through G requirements are?
That's an excellent question as well. You could be on do you want to be on a youth advisory panel for this? Because that's the perspective. So if you're transferring in district, obviously it's less cumbersome. Mr. Kollar has started to map out a journey experience for a student who's coming new to our system in the high school time frame. So what are the touch points to that student? So the registrar takes their transcript and we look at it and try to make sense of it in conjunction with the counseling staff. And there's education there in terms of here's A through G, this is what you need to complete in order for graduation, here's how you're getting these credits. What we're finding though with two different systems and from just our initial research of having different staff in play too, is that we want to tighten that procedure and have more consistency between the two high schools. So that you would know as a student, I'm new, where do I go? Who do I give my transcript to? What can I expect to understand? How does my family get help in understanding these things?
And last question, on the gun academic interventions, it said that only 13 out of 34 were A through G eligible after summer school. Was that because they didn't earn sufficient credits for summer school or because in general they didn't earn a passing grade in the summer school course?
Oh, that's the last page, hold on.
Page 7 out of 8, I think, at the top.
So that means, 34 attended summer school, and of that 34, 13 became A through G eligible because they took credit recovery prior to their senior year. Okay. Does that?
And for the 21 who weren't eligible, was that because they weren't able to recover enough credits during the period of one summer?
It's potentially that. We didn't drill as deep into each individual student's experience. Our goal is to have kind of the buckets and be able to give the next sub-buckets. So what you're seeing is just the initial results of our analysis. The gun team has gone much further, but we need to do that in conjunction as a whole district so that your October report would include information that says summer school of this group attended or attempted, successfully completed, still credit shy, if you will, so beyond the ability to recover those credits, to answer your question.
Okay,
It could
thank you.
also be that students, those 21 students are planning to take the course in their senior year, repeat the course.
That's also possible.
That's possible.
Yeah.
Thanks. Ms. Freyer.
Okay, thank you for this data. It's super interesting to me. I just want to start off by reiterating Mr. Durop's point about the senior year intervention, specifically second semester English. I think that's like a clear highlight for a need of some sort of independent study program or intervention regarding that. and I'm glad to see that these students have priority in applying or going to the summer schools. I was wondering just in general, in the effects of the intervention, if they're tracking these students who have indicators early on, and if they have priority enrollment in the beginning of their high school years for those students that might have the Ds and Fs in the beginning, do they get priority among other students in summer school courses?
So any student who's doing credit recovery has priority in terms of summer school. And seniors are prioritized, then juniors, and down the chain in terms of the credits needed.
Okay. And then my other question is a little bit specific, but relating to Gunn's 43 students with multiple D or F grades, I was just wondering what the two other cases would be. Like, what would that consist of? Just says other.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up because there is a point of clarification on page 6. The word multiple should not have appeared in the 2 section headers there.
Oh.
So those were 43 students that did not meet A to G because of a D or an F. And then the 43 are broken down in the list that's below it.
Okay. Okay.
So you're saying in the heading of Gunn's 43 students with multiple DF should not say multiple?
Yeah, it should just say 43 students with D and F grades.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
One of our editors went a little heavy with the multiple word, and that was not appropriate.
Great. Okay. Is that it? Okay, thanks. Okay, I know you've all been hit with a lot of questions. I think many of mine have been answered, but I might have a few more. The first one, I think I'm coming at you because I'm 4 months away from having a high schooler. So some people have already been through this and know this. But I was sort of, as I was reading this, I was gasping a little bit because I was under the impression that maybe we were sending kids off with an inaccurate understanding of whether or not they had met A to G eligibility. But it sounds like you were saying that on a kid by kid, the counselor, the kid, the family are
And the
looking at the
college.
transcript, you all know.
Yes.
That hasn't yet translated into that making its way onto the dashboard or into CalPADS.
That
or
is
whatnot.
correct.
And so
So
that's what we're trying to fix, but we're not communicating inaccurate information to students.
that is absolutely correct.
That's
So the counselors who do all of this heavy work share your frustration in terms of that being a perception, as that is not what is happening on the ground for students.
And I appreciate that. That was definitely one of my perceptions and concerns. It looks like Ms. Ofek has something to
I'll
say.
also add in that we start talking about A to G requirements in middle school when students sign up for electives in 7th grade. Some of our middle schools do have information nights around elective choices before students' choices are needed to be submitted. And those information nights revolve heavily around answering parents' questions around A to G and requirements, and mostly around
Foreign
world
language or-
languages and other choices that they get to make and what the trade-offs are for those. And so in those evenings, the parents who are in our district and attend those evenings get that information for sure, along with other ways, but that one in particular.
Great. I really appreciate seeing that focus on the next steps of exploring additional methods of altering students and alerting students and counselors of indicators that students are off track, right? This is something we've talked about a lot, that how do you wind up on the DF list or suddenly you're on the DF list, but does someone not right away have contact with you and rework your trajectory to make sure we get you back on? I think, I can't remember which of my colleagues said it, but thinking about there's a couple of different ways that these data are important. Obviously, we are being held accountable for these data and we want it to be as accurate as we can. But I think also just getting to more accuracy will give us this jumping off point where are we improving in future years? And while yes, I'd like to see that 83 or whatever higher, my suspicion is, well, we see it broken out, but in inaccurate numbers, that certain subgroups are really much lower than that. And that's really, I think, what we want to see a lot of movement on. So clearly, we need to be accurate in what we're reporting to know if we're getting better at that. Subgroups. I think you answered this one. So these lists that you said about multiple DFs, if you've got even a single DF, those are the data we're talking about on that last page, on the second last page.
Yes.
So I believe the first time I saw this was when I was first on the board, right about 2 years ago, when we saw a report. Now, the answer could be that those data weren't super accurate, but when we looked at a bar graph of which kids had missed by just one class, the large majority were missing an English credit. And that makes sense, given that you need 8 semesters of passing English. And so if you fail any one of them along the way, you're off target. I'm still, I know that you offer summer school for credit recovery, and I'm wondering, all along the way, if I fail my second semester freshman year of English, am I encouraged and am I made very aware that I can go to summer school to do that? And is it available to any student that wants to do it, that has expressed interest? If you fail an English class anywhere along the way and you want to make up for it over the summer, is that opportunity there to do it for any student? Okay, thank you. That one's already been answered. I'm just mindful of when you talked about students taking a pass or students being okay with the D or whatnot. I'm just thinking of the differences between our well-resourced kids and our less resourced kids. And so the risk is a lot lower if you are a highly resourced kid and you, I'm gonna take the pass here or whatnot. There's usually a lot more options for you. So I mean, there's not a suggestion and not even really a question. I'm just really thinking about what that means and how much, I mean, I think that's true across the board, right? If you are well-resourced, you can back off a little bit, or you can miss something and still have a lot more opportunities to make that up or close that gap. Whereas if you're less resourced, I think that's harder. And I think that's where we have a bigger role in making sure there are clear opportunities to recover those credits. So I'm just swimming with that. I think in a lot of aspects of what we're offering in our high schools, I'm thinking about what that means
I
for
want to
students.
underscore what she just said.
Yeah.
I think we have to make sure that we're helping students make the best choice for their path. And sometimes the best choice won't be what they think is the easy way to get through. And particularly if they don't have a lot of extra options outside, we need to think about how hard it would be for them to overcome taking the easiest path.
That's all I have. Thank you so much for the work on this.
Can I ask one follow-up?
To them?
No, to the superintendent, actually. As Ms. DeBrienza said, I mean, it's getting the disaggregated correct data, I think, is what we really need to do in order to understand the extent to which this picture is different for different subgroups of students. And it sounds like that work is happening. Will we see that updated disaggregated table once we're far enough along so that that's meaningful?
I'd say a couple things. I didn't want one part of this to be lost, and that is that Stevenson will be our new point person from now on this. So that will help us to solve and then keep this in place. As far as the disaggregated data from the past year.
Not the past years, I'm just talking about
No,
this.
you're talking about the future in October.
I'm talking about this, well, this report has, it's possible to calculate the correct roughly A to G graduation rate overall, but not for the subgroups, as far as I understand the data.
Right.
So once all of this work has been done in detail, it should be possible to then understand the correct rate for all of the subgroups. And I think that's what I'm interested in knowing whether we'll see, because I think that's important.
I will check with the team about getting it for this one, but I can tell you with certainty in October and beyond, that will always be a part of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to need that for the baseline for next year anyways, but I think it would be good to have it when it's available.
I'll get that in the update for this Friday.
Okay.
I'll have an answer for you.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Yes, Ms. Ophek.
I was just going to point out that 2019, the class of 2019 graduates in, 8 weeks. So we're establishing this as our baseline, and I hear multiple people saying we expect big improvements. I would love to see that, but I want to point out that that's in, 8 weeks from now. So we might see the bigger jump with our interventions that we put in place for the classes that are returning as juniors.
Yeah,
who are
I
currently
don't
juniors.
necessarily have an expectation, I think, but I do think we want to know what the delta is, one way or the other, yeah.
And if we get better at actually coding them, and then we're going to see lots of jumps, hopefully. Okay, I think that we can chug through a few more quick things before we break. Can we move on to the GUP?
Thank you. The Stanford University General Use Permit progress is up. That was funny.
Dr. Golden was ready to go.
That was funny.
You're next, just a minute.
Yeah, very, very quickly. Our meetings are starting soon. We are happy to be back at the table with Stanford University. The meetings will either have substance or they will not continue. So is our expectation that they're going to arrive prepared to talk to our 3 established goals, which are land for our commitment to neighborhood schools, one-time money, and some type of a funding source to mitigate the number of students generated, regardless of what that number may be. We have a hard stop of April 12th. I do not expect it to be that long. So if we do not have an agreement by then, we've predetermined that that would be an end date, but I don't think it will take that long to figure out. Our team is Dr. Novak and Ms. Hendricks and myself, along with our attorney. We have agreed on a third-party facilitator, and I was made aware that Stanford has picked up in the advertising business. Even as I was looking at articles this morning, I was hit with pop-up ads about how amazing it is that Stanford is adding affordable housing for their employees. So that was forwarded to me by many people, and I can concede right now we will not be able to keep up with the advertising and PR budget that Stanford University has. We're going to try to do good work in our negotiations, and I think you'll be well represented, and we'll keep you up to date. Just as a reminder, the actual content of the negotiations are confidential until a point to where we either call them off or find a mutual resolution.
Thank you. Rather than doing a go-around, I'm just going to see if anyone has any comments. Does anyone have any questions or comments about this? Wonderful. Let's go on to our action items. And now, Dr. Golden, please join us at the podium to talk about our funding for a Magical Bridge inspired playground.
Okay, first one. Well, I'm wearing this. It says kindness is magical. And by the way, we have here Olenka Villarreal, who is the founder of the Magical Bridge Project and our partner in all we're doing for this. As far as this action item, or this discussion item, the board's already approved the Magical Bridge Project at El Carmelo. The county, however, wants a specific resolution that authorizes the superintendent to execute all documents. This seems like a minimal ask. In addition, they would like this resolution by the end of the month. But we could perhaps extend them. But again, this seems like a minimal ask. And so therefore, I'm requesting that the board waive the 2-meeting rule, and then after that, approve this resolution.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Collins?
I move that we waive the 2-meeting rule in order to approve this.
Do I have a second?
I'd like to amend the motion.
Well, first we have to get a second, I think, before it's.
I'll second it.
Okay. Yes.
Okay,
Mr.
sorry
Jarrett?
for the ruckus.
Yes.
But before I do, I said this previously, I think that when we waive the 2-meeting rule on issues that have already been discussed multiple times at meetings before, we minimize the importance of the 2-meeting rule. I don't think that this is a situation where the 2-meeting rule even applies. Therefore, I don't think it needs to be waived. I think by suggesting that we waive the 2-meeting rule when it doesn't even apply, we create an expectation that we need to waive this two-meeting rule and disregard this rule that we have. And it creates a perception, I think, among the community that we are disregarding a board policy. I don't think that's true. I don't think the two-meeting rule applies. I'll read out the same portion I read out last time from the board policy on the two-meeting rule, which is an example that says, while the two-meeting rule applies when approving the district going out to bid, approval of the recommended bid typically only requires one meeting. And that can be on, without waiving the two-meeting rule, the two-meeting rule would not apply to that situation. This came in front of the board in October, and we voted to apply to the county for funding. It came in front of the board in December, where we voted to apply with an amended amount, and now we're voting to accept the funding. I don't think the two-meeting rule applies. I don't want us to continue setting a precedent where we have to waive a two-meeting rule that doesn't even apply, because I think that just looks bad, and it kind of waters down the effect of the rule. So if I can, I'd like to amend the motion to approve the resolution, period.
I'll second that.
I'm a little confused. I think you're just arguing against the motion to waive the two-meeting rule, right?
I think, yeah, I don't think it would be an amendment. I think we would vote it down and then just vote.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
right. You're
right.
proposing just a different thing, right? Part of it.
Yes.
You're voting to, you're
To
making a
excise.
motion to leave part of it off.
Yes, that's
Right.
right.
So, but I think that now that this is on the table, we have to move from there. I guess what you're saying is it makes most sense to, if you agree with Mr. Darup, vote down Mr. Khan's motion and then make a new one.
My motion was just to approve the, waive the two-meeting rule.
Oh, you didn't put the other part in it?
I didn't think I did. Oh, I meant to just do the,
That was just that.
I just to do, yeah, our traditional,
Okay.
our
Well,
traditional two-part.
I'd love to hear what others think. I think that Mr. Darup's argument makes a lot of sense about how many times we have seen this in front of us. And I appreciate that Dr. Golton is always very careful to make sure that we're not violating the two-meeting rule, but I think in this case, I'm not sure.
So I agree with Mr. Darup. However, this was noticed in the packet as with a recommendation from staff to do this.
Yeah.
So my suggestion would be we waive the two-meeting rule this time, but we go forward with, if it's not in board policy, something that we have to do two meetings on, then we don't need to do it unless a board member feels that we need to do it.
Okay. So, sure, Mr. Collins. No, go ahead.
So I appreciate Mr. Darup's input. I do think that the wording of the policy doesn't cover the case. It sounds like there's a little bit of a stretching it by analogy from a bid situation to approving a resolution. So if I would welcome the board policy review committee taking up the wording of the
two-meeting rule?
Have the two-meeting rule.
Oh,
terrific.
no,
I've been waiting for this opportunity.
At a minimum to address this aspect of it, and see if the board approves it. But I do feel a little uncomfortable, or let's put it the other way, in an abundance of caution for the reasons that Ms. Benton-Caswell said, and in general, I would rather just waive it, and then if board policy review committee wants to take it up, then I would welcome that.
Okay, so while you quoted part of the policy, what struck me was that we have discussed our desire to procure this funding at least 2 previous times, right? And so the idea behind the two-meeting rule is that we're not taking a vote without first sunshining what our desires are, what we're trying to do. So that has been public since the fall. We decided to go for this money. We amended it. We've expressed our desire for it. And we haven't heard any outcry from the community over trying to go for this money. So I don't think of it as I think the two-meeting rule is so that something comes up on our agenda at once before the night that we're taking action on it, and it has already come up before us several times. So that is why I think that the two-meeting rule wouldn't apply here. But I would love to hear anyone else's thinking on it.
So did he get a second on his motion?
I seconded it.
Oh, you did, okay.
But that was an amendment, so I don't know if it's actually on the table, because that was an amendment to something that first we have to go here for. So rather than taking any more time with this, let's think about whether or not you think we're supposed to be doing the two-meeting rule here and what you think about it. Mr. Collins moved that we waive the two-meeting rule. So I think that's the first thing that we're going to vote on right now.
And I
If-
seconded that.
And you seconded that. So that is on the table. So if you think that you want to maybe waive the two-meeting rule, or if you think that we don't have to be waiving it, let's vote on that first, and then we'll take up Mr. Drops. Okay? So students, we're voting whether or not you want to waive the two-meeting rule here.
Nay.
Abstain.
Okay. Colleagues,
Aye.
yeah.
I think it's a silly rule, so I'll vote to not to waive it, because I will point out that the point of the rule is so that the public, I think what I've heard is that the point of the rule is that the public understands exactly what we're doing when, and I think that we've amply demonstrated that it's not serving that purpose.
Okay, so the motion fails 2-3. So now, so I guess you don't have to propose, you don't, we need another motion.
So I'll move to approve the resolution accepting funding from the county.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Student preferential
Aye.
vote.
Aye.
Colleagues? Aye.
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 Unanimous, yay. Did we have a card here, or no? There was no card? You didn't want to say anything? Okay, great. Okay,
I got your money.
great. Is that all you needed from us?
Yes, it is.
That was a little sticky. Thank you so much. We are going to take a 5-minute break and come back at 8:33.
Don't give me that.
Agenda item 6, discussion items, and we'll start with 6A, the schematic design for El Carmelo. Is that on? I don't think it's on.
Oh, good,
There we go.
good. That was off the record. So at any rate, we have the schematic design for El Carmelo Elementary School to present to you. The board has previously approved the conceptual design, which is kind of this two-dimensional drawing, and now the project, well, is literally taking shape. The board approved it last June, and we're here tonight to present to you the schematic design and for discussion and then action at the next meeting. This is going well for now. The project's within budget. Not, again, those two numbers don't match because that's pure construction cost and they're all of the soft costs and added costs. And so, but the project's within, the estimates are currently within that $11 million budget. And as far as project schedule, we anticipate coming back to you with the submittal of plans to DSA in December of this year, and then an authorization to bid by September of next year. We have a presentation, and Tom Hodges, our program manager, is here to do that presentation, and then we'll be glad to respond to questions.
Good evening, everyone. So I have a few slides, but just wanted to remind the board that as part of schematic design approval, we're looking for you to approve the site plan, the floor plans, and the elevations for the project that you'll see later. If there are any changes during design development or CDs, we'll be sure to share those at our next check-in points when we go to DSA and when we get authorization to bid. So moving forward, the first slide here, we're looking at an aerial of the site at El Carmelo from sort of the Bryant side. There's three components to the project. The first is this multi-purpose building, which you can see is designed to sort of connect to this classroom wing that was built in 2001. There's a renovation of the old multi-purpose building here, and then we have site work associated with this new outdoor stage and hard courts, and then we will also have the magical bridge at some point when that gets developed further. Here is just a quick site plan that just shows what's new construction in the orange and what is renovation in the blue. And then this is sort of from a program when the construction is completed. You'll see that we have two new classrooms here. We have our kinder wing with a learning center in this location. We are keeping our resource center where it is located now. And then we have this new building that I'll go into more detail in the next slide. So here is our new building. It is set up with the entry this way. So there's a sort of an outdoor court that's covered that is a continuation of this covered walkway in Building F. So kids can come in, and this will be a queuing area either for coming into the MP for assemblies or for coming into the servery. From this, there's a lobby. This is an enrichment lab, which is set up to be a music classroom. So you can see it's been set up to be able to wheel large instruments and pianos up onto the stage and back with plenty of storage. We have this multi-purpose assembly area that has a sliding barn doors on this side that go out to the field space, and then obviously the stage here. This stage is set up to serve both an interior and an exterior. I'll show you some other slides later that kind of show this outdoor stage. Like I said, the servery is located here. We have an outdoor court area for trash and sort of back of house activities here. Two student gender neutral restrooms down here, and then a staff restroom up here with more storage for PE. Here's what the old multipurpose will look like when it's done. We've basically just set it up to be two larger than standard classrooms with some storage space. So here are some elevations of the project. So the first one on top is looking at the project and the building from the school side. So you can see this is the outdoor stage with the sliding or hangar door. We haven't quite thought that through yet. Down on the bottom, this is going to be the more public side of the building from the Ramona, looking from Ramona towards the school. So we have some clear story windows. This is a public entry here, and then this is going to be sort of the fenced area for that back of house area. Top slide here is looking at the building from the fields. So this is that sliding barn door I was speaking of that can open up during lunch. So it could really be an indoor-outdoor space. Down below, this is looking at it really from, this is what I call Building F. It's that classroom building that I was looking at. So here's the entry. As you can see, it's covered. And then this is the enrichment lab here. So on to some more interesting slides. This is a idea of what the public side entry of the multipurpose will look like off of Ramona. Basically showing some sunshade elements up here, like a perforated aluminum fins, but set up to let some kind of diffuse light into the outdoor space. This is a slide looking from the quad or maybe the administration building back at the, this is the enrichment lab. This is where you would enter into that covered space. And here's the outdoor stage over on that side. And lastly, looking at it from the field again at an angle or maybe the kinder wing, we have that sliding door that comes outside. And then this is the outdoor stage with the steps going out onto this area. So with that, those are our slides, and be happy to take questions.
Let's start with Ms. Baton Caswell. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hodges, I have a couple of questions for you about the layout here. When you talk about the two classrooms being larger than average or standard or whatever you said, do you mean larger than the old classrooms that we had in the building or larger than like the new ones we put at Duveneck?
Just, no, they're larger than most of our standard classrooms because, because this building is about 2,800 square feet. So half of that results in about 1,100
So like in an
square foot
old
restaurant.
classroom would be how big, like the old?
960 is our standard for
Okay.
most of the classrooms, and this will be about 1,100.
Okay.
So
And we're not-
we'll have some flexibility with these in the future.
And we're not putting a restroom into that
Not right now.
classroom configuration?
Not right now, but we may.
Okay, and then go to the theater stage building.
The plan,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah. There are restrooms to the left, to the left there.
Yep,
And then there's a 49 square foot restroom. What's that?
this one here,
Yeah.
just a single stall restroom.
And so is that a staff restroom or is that just an additional
This
kid
is the only
restroom?
one that's designated as staff. This may also be, we've also been doing sort of those private rooms also.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a placeholder, but
But they're standard sizes, so they could
Yes.
be for adults or for children, okay? And then when I looked at the picture, like looking straight ahead into the garage door building, where it says exterior elevations, it's not a numbered slide. Yeah, that, go back.
okay?
There's a door in the middle of the barn door.
Yeah, that's funny.
What is that?
So that's just so what this is showing is, this is showing these doors open, and there's a door beyond it.
Oh, okay,
It's
so that's
just-
not like a random door in the middle?
Right.
Okay.
I had the same question, but yes.
I was just trying to
What you're
figure out
seeing
how
is a
that
door-
worked. You open the door and there's a door in the middle?
Yeah.
Looks good. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Collins.
Looks good, no question.
Mr. Up.
Looks good, no questions.
Mr. Dauber.
I just have a question about the servery MP configuration. I've heard some interest in supporting the ability to do some cooking of food at the elementary schools to, as a possible upgrade to our lunch program. Would this configuration require, would this configuration forestall that possibility now or in the future? Or is there enough flexibility here so that there could be retrofitting of this? And this is kind of a question I have just generally about our MP strategy, whether we're going to consider that possibility.
Do that? Okay. So, these, yeah, the servery here and then also at Addison and Hoover are larger than obviously what we have now. And they do expand the capability of really making it more of a warming kitchen, but not necessarily a cooking kitchen. If we were going to go to cooking kitchens, then the health department would require us to provide like cold storage, dry storage, bathroom, changing facilities. It would really expand the square footage required. And then there's you want to address the operation part of it?
Yeah, well, as far as making these cooking kitchens, it's sort of, it revolves around the operational side of the school district. That is, if the school district wants cooking kitchens, we can do that. You know, we have the space to do that. But again, that's a question for operations to tell us what they want. But we have the flexibility to do it. Not only do we have the flexibility to do it, but we have the time. That is, this is the schematic design, and we're not going to be back again for like 8 months.
So I'm sorry, Dr. Colton, when you say we have the time, you mean?
We have the flexibility and we have the time to make these changes.
So the question, so I'm raising that question. I guess I'll give this some more thought about whether, and others can as well, about whether we want to pursue this this option, or at least hear from staff about whether this is an option we want to pursue. What I hear you saying, though, is that if we don't consider that option and build it into the plan now, we won't be able to we wouldn't be able to retrofit this in the future because the square footage requirement for a cooking kitchen would not be able to be satisfied with the footprint that we have here. Is that right?
Yes, but again, we have 8 months to for the operational side of the district to sort it out.
Okay.
It's a good question. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Verwacher.
Thank you for the presentation. I don't have any questions.
Ms. Freyer.
I also have no questions.
Okay, thank you. I'm really excited about these MP rooms that open up in either direction. I've been excited about these for a while. My one question, which isn't a question that just deals with these new construction buildings, it's bigger than that, but if we're building new buildings, my question has to do with shade. And at our elementary schools, we don't have enough of it at any of them. The data are clear about the dangers of too much sun exposure. Is there any way, I mean, given the fact that the stage opens up this side as well, are there ways we can think about having shade structures that are connected to these new buildings that offer some shade for the kids playing outside?
Yeah, sure. So part of the reason we're within budget is we've had to scale back a little bit on the overhangs. So let me get to this. So you can see where there's not a lot of opportunity in the design to create these sort of canopies.
Yeah.
That's why we kind of connected it to that building F to extend that. And as far as circulation goes, so if it's raining, there's a pathway into the MP without walking across. Can we? Yes. I mean, if that's a desire of the board, we can go back to the committee and say, okay, we want to show that we're incorporating more shade into the project. But it'll cost money, but that's okay.
Right.
I can't say, though, that in our staff meetings, that in our design meetings we've had, that there's been a big, the advisory committee hasn't really said we need more shade, just because they have those existing large overhangs where they eat lunch now.
Yeah.
But I could certainly ask the question.
I mean, I think it's, I don't know this campus so well that I know how many square feet, but I know that at our elementary schools, when the kids, I mean, I think the question is more when they're playing out on the play structures and whatnot, how many opportunities are there to play under shade? But I do think if we're building a new building, what's the opportunity there? I mean, I haven't heard a majority of the board say that this is a big concern of theirs, but I do think that it's something we just want to be mindful of in all our construction. We don't have enough shade at our elementary schools.
Can I,
You know,
can I add a comment on that?
Of course.
I think that's a good point, and I think it also falls in line with the point Mr. Dauber was touching on about nutritional health, is that we have, I mean, there's a set of health and wellness concerns that are not necessarily top of mind of our principal educators. Well, certainly not the building staff who are responsive to their clients, who are the people who are the site leaders. And the site leaders who are primarily focused on, correctly on educational outcomes and, proper use of the space, and aren't necessarily versed in, data about sun exposure or nutritional, with the value of great nutrition. And so it kind of, I think there's an area for Dr. Austin and the DO to get involved, because this is really a DO function. It's like, how do we drive those health and wellness concerns through our building program? Because right now there's, they've got a minimum floor of health and wellness concerns, and then it's up to the site leadership. And I think that's an unfair burden to put on the site leadership. And they really should look for guidance from the DO.
Yeah,
So anyway, sorry to interrupt.
So let me just say, wait one second, that I think the site leaders are, I mean, at least my understanding is all the principals are really concerned about shade, but it's unclear how to go about getting that shade. So I think even speaking for that, I think that that's a role that the district office can play in thinking about what are those health and nutrition things, what are those shade issues that we can incorporate into something that maybe you guys wouldn't otherwise have top of mind.
Well, this is something I think that needs to be looked at as what are our standards for our sites that we would like to have.
Yeah.
So we
Generally.
don't end up with like, one site gets it, one site doesn't get it. We have some plan overall. The other thing is shade doesn't have to be an overhang. I mean, shade can be plants, shades can be, there are many options for that. And I do think that the site committees are trying to figure out how to get as much teaching and learning space into the budget that they have. So we've sort of created a situation where they're trying to reduce costs to have as much square footage of classroom as possible too. So there needs to be something that comes from the district office on that.
Mr. Durab.
To the extent there's a question about, what the board's priorities are, I'll just echo that I have heard nutrition, specifically cooking food, either at the campuses or in a central kitchen, to be a high priority for community members. And I've also heard of shade to be an area of concern. And so I echo those issues my colleagues have brought up.
Did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I was just going to say, at some of the other campuses where we're doing these projects, they've, these opportunities where the outdoor stage is and the connection to this wing would be a natural place to incorporate more shade, right? Because I think they've envisioned these being places where they could do assemblies or just for a place for kids to hang out. So I'll certainly bring that to our next series of meetings. And then when we come back, I can report back to you.
Thank you.
Okay?
So I do think that, I think the new nutrition piece of this is a bigger deal. So I would like to, as we're embarking on a big, process here and, involving the MP rooms, I think it would make sense for us to develop a understanding about where we want to go with that so that we don't wind up,
Closing doors behind us.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, and I think this is an appropriate time to do it. Sounds like there's time, as Dr. Colton says, but this is the time if we want to develop that.
So our facilities committee or building committee, who's on that? I'm forgetting who's on it from the board. We have
Facilities committee?
property committee. I'm sorry, the property committee. Is this, I mean, it seems like we would want to have some sort of standards that we say are important for us to have at all of our schools rather than when you guys go back, find some more shade, figure out how to make a kitchen. To me, that doesn't seem strategic in how we're planning. And since these are very big investments for a district, it feels like we should have some, the board should have some discussion.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that in my mind, the direction that we sort of just gave towards the central administration is, this is the building we're talking about right now, but please think about these things as we build them, not just this one, but in general. Is that what you heard? Thinking about that bigger picture. Okay.
I guess I'm just saying something slightly different, that we have standards in, like, we made a decision that we want to have a certain standard of playground as we move forward at all of our schools. Is there some decision we want to make around shade? Is there some decision we want to make? And I think that's for the superintendent to go back and discuss with staff whether that makes sense for planning purposes.
Agree. Great. Okay, thank you so much.
Great.
On to the PAUSD promise, operations.
That's right. I'd like to have Dr. Golden do this for me because everyone loves everything he says. So, as he runs for the door. All right. I have a lot of notes on here, so I'm going to do the best I can. We're going to start kind of in reverse order with the metrics. One of the metrics that we're going to use to measure district office operations, and this comes from a survey that had 70% participation rate of all employees, which is off the charts, through an outside company that we're using called Orgametrics. Orgametrics is helping us with alignment. In the general thought behind Orgametrics is that organizations often measure the wrong things. They focus in on engagement, and you can be highly engaged in the wrong work. And the idea here is that if you measure alignment, you're measuring the alignment of employees to the things that you wish them to be aligned to, including things like mission and vision, leadership, ability to move key things forward, communication. And you can see the areas on that would be the left side of the screen. Couple things jump out. We have a lot of data back from Orgametrics. You're seeing just a sliver of it right now. We have a group of about 15 that's going to meet routinely with they call them chiropractors, people that help you to make adjustments along the way of how we can impact our alignment that should lead to better outcomes for our employees and for our students. Couple things to point out is the graph, the picture in the middle is really powerful because it shows, it represents where we are stronger or weaker in a visual. Now, the results as a whole point to a few things that may not shock everybody. Number one is that in the areas of leadership and communication, we are not strong right now. That does not mean that people aren't communicating. It does not mean that there aren't strong leaders. It means that when people were asked specific questions about does leadership have a plan, is it communicated, we scored poorly in those areas. Starting points. Orgametrics assigns a score based on your survey results, and we scored, I think it's like a 32. And when you look at our scores in isolation without context, you would think that this is a really horrible starting point. And the reality is it's a pretty bad starting point. It probably doesn't reach the level of horrible, but it is not great. But I asked with our group for what this means in context of other districts that they're working with across the country. And they said, while it's lower than most, it's not well out of the norm. And in fact, an Orgametric score, if you start approaching that 50 number, starts to look pretty good. They also said in your first year, not to expect more than about a 5 percentage point increase in categories. So just to manage expectations, our Orgametric score of 32.5 is not going to be a 60 next year. They said huge growth would be if we came in around 36, 37, 38. Getting into the descriptors of each category is a bigger exercise than we have time for now. I think in the future, this would be worthy of about a half-hour discussion on just this topic alone, but it is going to be one of the true metrics that we can use to measure our district in a survey that took less than 15 minutes to complete with a high participation rate. Those are good things. Some things that we've already identified through our first meeting. We've got another one on April 15th and another on May 9th. Our school district has some structural holes, and those holes occurred over time. And part of the reason we have those holes is because of turnover. And in fact, turnover was one of the major themes that people that took the survey told us is impacting their ability to be aligned with the district. As a whole, and this is not true of every aspect, but as a whole, we are systems poor. We don't have great systems in a lot of places where you would expect a district of this level would already have some pretty good things in place. Does not mean good things aren't happening, but in these cases, a lot of times they're happening despite the holes and not because a system is solid. So our organizational clarity is not our strength right now. And we think we're taking steps to make it better. But as a starting point, not only is it not a strength, it's a recognized weakness by our employees, which is okay. Because a lot of employees also said, we understand there's been a lot of turnover, and we're going to give this time and hope for the best. There was some optimism, but it was a cautious optimism reading through the reports. If we can switch over now to the operations section, and then specifically down to HR, I want to focus, thank you. I want to focus tonight on one particular section. And this is actually, I think, going to be a decent example because some parts of the promise in general don't look like there's a lot of words, but I want to show you how many actions can come out of a couple lines. And one of the first bullet points there is, well, actually, is the first bullet point, reorganize and align senior and middle management. One thing I noticed, and it took almost a year of watching how things work together. A system is more than an organizational chart piece of paper. A system is how things work together. And sitting back, you could start to see where things bump into each other and where some things are working in perfect harmony and where some things are working in structural opposition. That's my job. That is my job, to identify those things and then to, when the time is right and there's enough information, to correct them. I'm going to back up on a couple other things. This organization as a whole has great people, and they have great people that are working hard and are committed. And that's all the more reason why we need structures and systems in place so the outcomes can match the effort. And while as a whole now, some of the decisions and the things that I'm going to talk about in just a second are not in alignment and not working well, they probably all made sense in the moment. You know, these weren't a series of bad decisions. They were probably largely good decisions in the time that over time have ceased to work in the way that they may have been designed. I've spoken with several of our team members about what I'm going to share with you, so this is not a surprise to any employee that's sitting with us today. Got their feedback, and I would say, well, not every detail is worked out right now. We're far enough to share some things. We'll start with special education. Here's just a fact, and this came, I'm going to paraphrase a conversation I had with Alma Ellis today. All students, all kids start in general education And then as needs arise, we provide additional services for certain kids for certain situations. But the idea is that we start in a general ed setting and then work away from it. In fact, I hear all the time the phrase least restrictive environment misused. The least restrictive environment is general ed. And then from that, you provide services and appropriately placed students. But the starting point is general ed. And I'm going to tell you why that's going to matter here in just a second. Our system, not the people, created division lines between general ed and special education, including things that sometimes people would not consider, like professional development, efforts to address things like dyslexia, inclusion models, behavioral issues. Our system made it very challenging to have a seamless interaction between the general ed and special education wings of our district. At the same time, our system does not promote a great way for general ed and special ed to interact, despite efforts. You know, we invested time trying to make it work, and it's just not clicking. Our secondary director of special education left at the beginning of this school year. Timing could not have been worse. So we had a director of special education for secondary students who left in, I don't know, August, September, August. Almost impossible to find a person to plug in at that point in the year. Alma Ellis was a star, and Alma stepped up, and not only stepped up and took on the entire role, we consolidated and made a single director of special ed, but in Alma style, did it with a smile. And I just can't tell you how much that is appreciated, her attitude and desire to jump in. Our assistant superintendent, Ms. Conway, same thing. We tried to find ways to make it work, to get through it. Her hands-on work helped us get through the year. But on the other side, our ability to address equity and access, student discipline disparity, SEL, connections with colleges, including the next level of work that we should be doing as far as concurrent enrollment or dual enrollment, guidance coordination, things like Parent University that people here have asked me, why don't we have something that looks more like what you've had some other places? Our outreach efforts, guidance coordination, guidance coordination, attendance, our focus on attendance, family engagement. We've heard that maybe our family engagement specialist and that whole thing could look a little different, but we haven't had time and energy to focus in some of these areas. So they haven't received our best attention. Some of our most important work around culture and equity was cut short because the people that were charged to do it lacked the positional authority to carry through and get it done. And then, when there are people that did have the positional authority, their efforts were stretched so thin with job descriptions with lots of commas that, again, the work didn't get done the way we would hope. I have 6 things I want to share with you, and these are things that are pretty immediate. So these are things we're going to start transitioning on right away. In fact, in some cases, these transitions have already began. Special education will no longer be a set aside. It will no longer be something that at best is working parallel. It will be integrated into educational services. The connection between general ed and special ed will be seamless. It'll be daily. It'll be, for lack of a better term, traditional. Most school districts, special ed is not outside of educational services. It's a key part of it. We would like to post the secondary special education director position almost immediately. I've asked Ms. Hendricks to start reviewing those documents. That is not a position that was ever eliminated. It was just not filled. Ms. Ellis would return to her role as Director of Elementary Special Education, which, by the way, was the #1 recommendation of our elementary principals when asked what they needed in assistance to help them do their jobs at their school sites. Ms. Ellis and I have already spoken about this. By doing this, we can team the special ed directors with the assistant superintendent at the same level. So in this case, Ms. Brown would be teamed with Ms. Ellis. Ms. Ofek would be teamed with our future director of secondary special education, which I'm sure she will have a high interest in recruiting a fantastic person. We can dedicate, at this point, Ms. Conaway to the important things that we previously mentioned as needing our full attention and give it the positional authority it has never had to actually carry through with an expectation of success. Ms. Stevenson, who you heard from tonight, will be the unquestioned point person with guidance coordination between our schools, and will have a more traditional student services position working directly with Ms. Conaway. We'd shift the face of special ed from an assistant superintendent to each of our directors, and they would have a consultation relationship, which is much, much more traditional. I asked both of our assistants to contact a previous director of special ed and just talk about what did that relationship look like. Our assistant superintendents should be consultation, not doing the work of a director. And we have one great director, we're going to find another, and along with their teams, I'm very confident that this can help us. That's quite a bit. So I'm going to stop at this point and can take questions, and I can tell you that Ms. Conaway, Ms. Ofek, Ms. Brown, Ms. Stevenson, Ms. Ellis, along with Ms. Hendricks, have all been involved in this, some more recently than others. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Dauber?
I certainly trust your judgment about how to proceed with the organization, so I don't have any questions.
Ms. Bain-Caswell?
Yeah, I figure you've done this many times. So if you think this is the right way to organize to be effective, I trust that that will work, or you'll adjust it if it doesn't. I don't know if you want any comments on the other things in the district office operations. Because I only had one thing.
Yeah.
On the how will we measure progress, I think we need some sort of measurement of community trust or community understanding. It seems like there's a bunch of things that are about our organization and making sure our organization's aligned, and I completely support that. But we have to remember that our community is pretty active here, and we should just measure how effective we are communicating with them.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Collins?
Sounds good, don't mess it up.
Okay.
Mr. Drupp?
I have no comments.
Mr. Probaka?
No comments.
Ms. Furr?
No comments.
Okay. Yeah, I trust you guys to work this out and appreciate your experience in other districts. I love the idea of special ed not being separate from education services. It's, when you say it that way, it sounds ridiculous, and yet this is the district that I've been in for a while, and it didn't strike me as particularly odd until you called it out. So I appreciate it being a part of our education services, because that's what it is. And I love that there will be a secondary director back in our midst, because it's just there's a lot going on. And thank you, Ms. Ellis, for all you took on. So yeah, I look forward to hearing an update when you hire someone, when you restructure, as we keep on moving.
I just want to add one last piece. I didn't want to miss this one. We're going to host our first PAUSD recruitment event. I don't know if it's first ever, probably not, but it's going to be the best ever. Amazing. And we're doing that on April 13th, and Ms. Hendricks and I are also going to the county recruiting event this Saturday. And we're going to go and recruit people to come to our own event on the 13th. And yeah, we're telling everybody. There's no secret. So we're excited about that. We have some positions to fill, and this is a great place to work.
Great, thank you.
You know, I have just one more question there. You didn't highlight the evaluation system, and that's a pretty big deal because putting in an evidence-based feedback program with growth opportunities and coaching. Are you going to come back to us and talk more about that later?
Yeah, we can certainly do that, and that'd be something I'd ask Ms. Hendricks to do, and we can put something together for you.
I'm very glad to see it.
Great. Okay, colleagues, we are moving on to our information items.
Oh, wait, before we do, we were supposed to be able to give some feedback on the other two sections if there was any
Sure
thing. Are we going to go around and do that?
I think if anyone has anything to add, I was thinking all of it kind of went together, but if you've got something to add
On the other which section?
on the other section, the potential revisions.
Okay.
Right, talked about. So it sounds like you have something, so why don't you start, and if anyone else has anything to add, they can.
Okay, first I want to say I see that there were some additions, and I thank you, particularly in the high-quality teaching and learning. There were some, I was really happy to see that the arts are in here. I would love it if you were able to, where it says support rich and meaningful creative arts, learning experiences for students of all abilities, for us to just augment it from meaningful creative arts and enrichment learning experiences for students of all abilities. Because we have other things that engage kids with school that are, I think, important for students of all abilities to have access to. Do I need to tell you what they are? You know what I'm saying? Okay. Under instructional practices, I wonder if, what I brought up before under special ed was where were we going to talk about addressing dyslexia above early elementary school? And I have a suggestion to put it under high quality teaching and learning because 20% of a student body or of a population has dyslexia. And so I just suggest we put a line item, a strategy line item under instructional practice to provide evidence-based teacher professional development and instructional practice support to assist students with dyslexia at all school levels. It can be whatever you want it to be, but you understand what I'm saying, is making sure that teachers are supported so that they can support and address student needs that have dyslexia. And then my last thing is, I would like to see a metric around engagement. And so here's my suggestion, that we increase the California Healthy Kids Survey percentage measurements for student connectedness, learning engagement, and meaningful participation. So we're doing California Healthy Kids, we have to do that survey, right? I mean, that's by law?
We have to do it every other year. That's in a different section that we haven't brought back yet. That's under the the wellness section.
So I see.
There's a subcategory specifically called connectedness.
Okay, but learning engagement is connected to high-quality teaching and learning. So you can put it all in wellness, but then put the learning engagement there, or you can decide that learning engagement goes under high-quality teaching and learning. But I think it's important that we're measuring that.
Does anybody else have anything to add to this part?
So just so that I understand, changes that are subsequent to the conversations that we've had about these sections earlier are going to come back. Is that right? And we're going to have another discussion here, either all together or individually. Is that right?
The way I'm seeing this is at the end, we'll just bring the whole thing back in one big move.
Okay.
We'll highlight the things that mattered that were changed along the way, the difference between first time you saw them and then.
Okay, so we'll see this again.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so that being said, that we got a very thoughtful letter from a bunch of community members this afternoon that you probably haven't had time to process. I know I didn't. I only was able to read it really quickly, and I hope you'll consider what they have to say and, about whether it makes sense to add that or not.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, colleagues, on to our information items rather than go through each one at a time. These are reports, if you will, information that's in the packet. And if you have any questions about any of them, we'll start with Mr. Durop, and you can just bring up issues in any of them.
No, I don't.
Okay. Mr. Dauber.
I actually, on the Public Records Act item, I was curious, and I didn't ask this question in advance, which I could have, and I apologize. So if you don't have the answer, I'm interested in where we stand with regard to outstanding pages between this month and previous months. I know that there's been some action taken to sort of close especially large requests, and I just am interested in the impact of that on the backlog.
Would it be okay if that was in this Friday update, or?
Absolutely,
Okay,
sure.
We'll just do that.
Ms. Payne-Caswell.
I just noticed, and let's talk, that it seems like we had seems like there's more top interest areas, and if there's some themes, if maybe in your Friday update, you could share with us some themes that you're hearing.
I missed the very first part of your
Oh,
statement.
I'm sorry, in Let's Talk, if I look at slide number 7 in Let's Talk, it looks like there were a substantial number of comments or questions on high-quality teaching and learning, wellness and safety.
I can answer that right now. So those interest areas that represent the LCAP feedback collected, specifically related to those areas.
Okay.
Through the
So
Let's Talk platform.
I guess my request is when you start seeing themes on certain topics, Dr. Austin, if you can just include that in your weekly update, those themes, it's helpful for us to know what they are.
I understand. Okay.
Mr. Collins. Mr. Durop.
I'm sorry, I looked and I did have a note for one item. On the chronic absenteeism. So I actually had a conversation with our great student board reps, and I'm sure they'll elaborate on this as well. But from them and other students I talked to, it seems like there's an issue with absenteeism when it comes to homework stress. There are students who cut classes to do homework. I'll say that when I was in high school, I did this as well, and I'm not proud of it. But it happens quite a bit because they need to get homework done before a class. And another issue is, the process is quite onerous from the student's perspective to get absences excused in advance. And so many times students will feel like perhaps it's not worth it and they'll just take the cut, not knowing that on a larger scale, when we look at this data, we see pretty striking issues with absenteeism. Students aren't comfortable saying they're not prepared for a class, they're not done with homework, they're not prepared for something that's going to happen. Again, the stress of that can cause students to cut classes. Now, I don't know the extent to which that is reflected in the data and how many students actually do it out of the ones that are reported. So I would just wonder, do we have any metrics for figuring that out?
I'm not sure I followed your whole question, to be honest with you, but I think you're asking if there's any metrics to figure out whether or not, or to find out the reasons why students are cutting class.
Yeah.
Or the root causes.
Better said than I did.
I would suggest that the reason being given is not necessarily the root cause. So I think there's an issue around overscheduling of our students and overcommitment of their time, and juggling and managing with time management becomes the issue, and the casualty is homework. I think that is part of it, and I know where this is going. It's always homework, and it's not always homework. We have to be really realistic about the fact that homework comes with going to school. The quantity for sure is being addressed by our staff, and but at some point, we have to address the causes of why that homework's not completed also, which isn't always connected to the quantity. And I don't know that there's a way to do that, because when parents or students provide an excuse for an absence, I don't think that that's necessarily where it's at. So the rationale or the excuse given isn't necessarily always authentic.
Okay. I'll just comment a little bit on that, which is, I will, yeah, which is to point out that the challenge success surveys do actually include, as I'm sure Ms. O'Fig knows, an item or a couple of items that touch directly on this point. And I cannot quote the exact numbers, although they're quite high. Students who report that they have missed class either to do homework or because they haven't done their homework and they don't want to go to school with their homework undone. Why it is that they haven't, that they can't accomplish getting their homework done in the time allotted, I think, is also addressed by one of the items in the Challenge Success Survey, which shows that, more than half of our students are out of, for more than half of our students, we're out of compliance with homework policy. But so there is, the Challenge Success Survey is a really great source of data on exactly this point.
I just want to repeat a story that I told a couple of weeks ago, which is, I was presenting to a group of students, and a young woman shared that she didn't feel it was necessary to go to class as long as she kept her grades up. And I think the first thing is we need to be making a connection between students that are not doing well academically and are missing classes. Then the next level down is you need to make sure that we're not encouraging some populations to take easier classes than they're capable of doing in order for them to miss classes. Does that make sense? So taking the easier class schedule so that they can come to school less often. And I'm only saying this because I had a young woman say this to me, that this was her strategy. So I doubt she's the only one. We need to dig into this a little further. I'm not saying this is with every child, but I think that there are multiple reasons that students cut class. And the reason that absence is one of the indicators that the state is looking at is because they really don't want the one I'm talking about to be happening.
Do you want a second go around too? Mr. Collins? No. Okay. Ms. Freyer?
I would say, as a person that provided some of this feedback to Mr. Drop about some reasons why that I've seen students not go to class, I do think regardless of those reasons, there should be some sort of metric or survey sent out to see why students don't want to go to class. It might be homework, it might be connectedness to their teachers, but I think it would be useful data.
Is there some place where this absence data is sorted between excused versus unexcused / cuts? Because this, when it defines chronically absent, is that for excused as well? Okay. Yeah, so I guess seeing whether specifically HUR students who are chronically absent are more likely to be unexcused would be interesting to figure out why that is. And also, like Caroline said, I think homework, while it isn't the main reason why students cut class, I think what I've observed at Gunn is that there are students who would not go to a certain class, maybe a class they don't see as hard, to study for a test or finish homework for another class. So for example, if they have a period in the morning, they would not go to that class and instead do homework and study for a test for a class in the afternoon that they value as more important. And I think part of that is changing the perception around certain classes. I know for sure English classes are often seen as less important or class that people can skip. And I think kind of changing that perception among the student body can definitely help for taking away, I guess, strategic cutters.
I have nothing to add on this. I think that is it for our information items. Yes? Board operations, Mr. Drop.
I would like to, under 8D, acknowledgements and recognitions, As a new board member, I've had the opportunity now to meet with almost every member of the executive staff here. And it's been very illuminating to have these meetings because it's really shown me the depth of experience that each one of you bring to the district. The leadership, the creativity, and just the amount of hard work that you all put into serving our students is very inspiring. And I know we often congratulate you or recognize you on discrete issues during board meetings, but after having met one-on-one with most of you and really discussed your background and the job that you do for this district, I wanted to take a moment to really thank you once more, because I think it's important for us to have good systems, and we need to work on that. But the systems are only as good as the people who run them. And I think we have a very, very good team here, and I think the systems we put in place are going to be very good because of that. So thank you very much.
Mr. Dauber.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with that, and I thank you for taking the time to make that observation and to do and have the meetings to base that on. I don't have anything beyond that.
Jane Caswell.
Yeah, I don't have anything as inspirational to say, but I do. I always think it's wonderful to work with all of you. I want to share that I went to the SF Squared Symposium, and each of you should have a document, one that has the presentations from the symposium, and that includes some commentary on some legislation that's coming up or is already passed, and a book of comparative budget and salary data for other basic aid or community-funded districts. I also went to Guys and Dolls and the Heights, and I love them both. It was fabulous. And I actually saw the Heights in a professional production in San Francisco, and I thought the one at Gunn was better. The energy was just awesome. Having so many students, I believe that there were probably about 100 kids at each school involved with each of those productions. You had 45 or 47 kids on the stage at each school, but you also had kids underneath the stage playing instruments. And I mean, we had like full-on orchestra pits full of musicians. The costumes were designed by kids. They were made. The backdrops to the shows, the tech during the show. I think we don't realize how many people are involved when we do something like this, which is why we don't do a musical multiple times a year or even every year. But I just thought they were outstanding. And if you missed it, I hope, Jim Shelby said that he recorded some of the Heights, and I'm hoping that Michael Nahar did for Guys and Dolls, because I think you'd really just feel good. I also wanted to encourage you on that same note. A lot of our kids have done artwork for Youth Speaks Out, which is opening on Thursday at the Palo Alto Art Center, which is a museum that actually allows us to exhibit our kids' work. Most high school kids don't get the opportunity to exhibit in a real museum. If you can get over there, maybe not on Thursday, but maybe over the weekend and check it out, I think you'll be really happy to see it. Particularly the Youth Speaks Out artwork all has very specific meaning connected to each piece. It's all about sort of what young people are thinking about, what our young people are thinking about, particularly around areas of angst. And I do think that's one way to understand better what's going on. And then the last thing on Wednesday, which is tomorrow, the Santa Clara School Boards Association is going to have Ted Lambert speaking. And if you'd like to come, it's open to come at 7:30 at the Santa Clara County Office of Education.
Mr. Collins.
I didn't attend any high school musicals or meet with any of the senior staff, but I did attend not one but two city school liaison committees. We had an internal meeting of our committee members plus the full-on meeting with the city, and there's a written report, but there are three things that I just wanted to call out. One is on grade separation work, the city is changing their process to create a larger working group, not just including citizen input, but also institutional input, including businesses in the research park and elsewhere, and Stanford. And there was definitely a sense at the meeting that should also include the schools as well. We have not formally participated in those committees to date, but this seemed to be a committee that was worth our time. This is a committee that is, I think they're looking for validation for funding proposals, among other things. And since there will be multiple hundreds of millions of dollars bond issues associated with this, I think we want to have a seat at the table for this. So that's one thing. Second is we reviewed Cubberley plans, which I think, are they attached here? Yeah, they are attached here. Thank you, Vicki. We had beautiful large color ones, but you can see the black and white ones. The significance of these plans is they show different housing scenarios, which we had talked about when the Cubberley group came and Concordia group came and presented to us. There's a small, medium, large, and extra large option for housing. And apropos to our discussion from the superintendent's report on the staff survey, we really need to come to grips with what we want to do here. We're meeting jointly with the city on May 6th, I guess it is, something like that, with the city council to review the final work product from Concordia. Unless we extend their work at that point, they're done, and they'll have presented our options, and the ball will be in our court and the city's court to decide what we want to do from here. So I think it is timely for us to start thinking about not only these housing scenarios, which I think are a significant variable for us to look at, but also, like, what is the next step in this process? And I think staff probably needs to spend time thinking about it. I think the board needs to spend time thinking about it because, we can't, we'll have whatever we have from Concordia, and it'll be time to decide if we're going to continue on this path and if so, how and doing what and what is it going to cost. Finally, we talked also about the North Ventura coordinated area plan and reiterated, I think for the second or third time, how important it was to consider schools in the scenario. They're talking about potentially building hundreds of units of housing there. There are no schools in the Ventura neighborhood today. So we urge them to give us, again, a seat at the table. And we're being told the table has no additional seats, but they're agreeing to meet with Dr. Novak. They literally are. They're saying there are 14 people in the group, and it will require an act of the city council or God or something to add a 15th chair, and that can't possibly be done. So we're having a side meeting with the director of planning at the city, Dr. Novak is. But I think it raised a bigger issue that I just want to call out, which is that, as the city, things are changing. The Stanford's growing, the city's growing. There's SB 50s and SB whatevers that are changing the housing trajectory, and there's the comprehensive plan from last year, the year before. And what we have found in the city school committee is that the city does not automatically include us in their thinking, not to mention their processes. And one of the things that we said at the meeting is that they should be thinking about schools first, not as an afterthought, but it should be one of the first thoughts that they think about when housing is added or when there's thoughts of creating new neighborhoods or rezoning or anything like that. If they're not thinking about schools and we don't have a seat at the table, then when we get to the table, we might find there's no room for schools, or the schools are in the wrong place. Let me finish. It's clear that their thinking is not along those lines. So I think it's really important for us to keep emphasizing that it's necessary for them to change the way they think about us and include us as a partner from the start rather than as somebody who kind of like is sending it back, raising their hand, which is, I think, the way we are now. So that is my report from the city school committee.
I just wanted to ask you a question, Mr. Collins, about that. There is somebody in the Ventura working group who used to be a school board member.
There is?
Yeah, and that's Gail Price.
I know.
You know her?
Neighbor.
Yeah, so you probably knew this. I'm just wondering if we still should have a seat at the table, but if Dr. Austin, maybe we need to sit down and talk to, maybe there's some other people on that committee as well.
There are really two people who are involved with the schools on the committee. Carrie Templeton is also on that committee, on the working group, or I think they call it. But yeah, obviously they are cognizant of the school's interests, but don't represent our
I
interests,
totally, yeah.
So I agree, and I think it's an and, not
Yeah,
an either.
and in the past, we have gotten invited to be a participant in comprehensive plan committees. We might not have had a vote per se, but we were expected to be there and sit at the table. So I think maybe you should ask the city manager how we make that happen again.
I mean, we've talked about this before, but I mean, there's the seat at the table, but then there's, what do we want to say and what do we want to ask for? And I think with respect to Ventura specifically, we should decide whether we want to indicate an interest in having a school there, right? I mean, that's the issue. In other words, it's up to us, I think, to decide whether, given the plan, we believe that there should be a neighborhood elementary school located at Ventura, and we should decide that and then voice that.
So I think that's right. It's a little premature for that because this is the work to get to a plan. There is no plan today. So this is the working group that provides input to generate the draft plan that City Council would consider. And so there are lots of options on the table. So I think it's premature for the board to act because we don't know what they would build. They could build no housing there.
But we did ask, actually, the three of us asked if we could have a study session this spring to talk about housing, to understand what housing's coming in, and as best we can, try to figure out whether we need to do anything.
I think we're not at a point where we have any idea what housing is coming, but I think we can have it in the hopper for when we start to get some clarity on.
Well, there's some things that maybe we start with Ventura, with whatever they're presenting to the working group. Maybe we start with that, so at least we all know what it is.
I think we're not there yet, though, right?
That's my view, but again, Dr. Novak, you're meeting with Jonathan Lade in, 2 weeks?
It's in the middle of April, and so my understanding is at that working group meeting, that's the first time they're rolling out their first alternatives. So I haven't been to any of the working group meetings, but when I talked to them, they said, don't worry, we haven't done anything substantive yet. That'll be rolled out at the April meeting. And so that's when I asked, I said, I'd rather not be at that meeting and learn at that time. Can we be part of the conversation ahead of that? And he agreed to that.
So can I suggest a process, just to your point, Ken, is I think, it's staff, I think, can represent, what we're trying to do is generate options, right? And figure out, make sure we have options to pursue as the plans become more clear. So I think that's a great staff function for the staff to say, let's make sure our options are considered. And then when something is ripe enough, I think it absolutely is necessary for it to come to the board to say, hey, we have a chance now to say, we should build a new school here, or we should swap this site with Ventura, or we should do nothing because this can be accommodated at Barron Park. But when the plans are a little more baked, I think that would be the right time.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably some sort of threshold level of new housing and new student expectations, for that area that would cause us to say, yeah, we really should have a school there. I'm sure that staff can identify what that is, but I think that's the kind of thing that it would be very useful to communicate to the city so that it's not a surprise to them that, certain scenarios that they're considering would trigger a need for a school. Yeah.
So after you get the report for April, whatever that date was, maybe circulating it to us, or if there's not enough information in the actual written report and there needs to be some speaking around it, present it to us?
I mean, there's also, obviously, if we're meeting with the city council on whatever it is, May the 6th, that's an opportunity also to maybe briefly address this question. It may be premature in a process sense, but it may not be premature in an awareness sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a really good point. And I think from our own awareness, as I think about these issues, I mean, it's chess, not checkers, right? Because, it may be that if we add 500 units of housing, and I'm just throwing out a high number, at the Fry site, we'd have a hard decision to make about whether we opened a school in Ventura and closed a school somewhere else. Because we had enough capacity, to your point, it's not capacity, it's proximity. And whether having 500 kids crossing El Camino every day was a good idea, or to have 100 kids going the other way. Those are hard decisions. But if we don't start thinking about them, we'll never be able to make.
Exactly.
Thanks. There are two different meetings I wanted to talk to you all about. We don't have to make a decision about them right now, but just to put on your radar, our next board meeting isn't for a full month. And this is the time of the year when we have a lot of things we need to approve and pass.
President DeBranza wants to fix that problem. though.
Yes, I think you might hear a proposed change coming on. So I'd like to send out a doodle poll, I guess, to find out availability for perhaps the Tuesday before that, so that we don't have that much of a lag time. Instead of having 4 weeks and then 2 weeks, we'd have 3 weeks and then 3 weeks. I don't know if people are in town and how that will work. I think it makes sense to keep it on a Tuesday, so the community knows generally when to expect it. We'll talk about it. And the other one is, we currently only have one June board meeting scheduled, and we're going to need a second one to approve the LCAP and the budget and all kinds of things. So I think it makes sense to put it on the 18th or whatever that third Tuesday is, bless you, is in June. But again, we will send out, perhaps Vicki will send out, some questions checking on availability. And either way, in June, we have to find another date. For the April one, we may or may not change it depending on availability. So look out for those polls and please be responsive to them.
I'm surprised we don't have a second meeting scheduled in June already. I thought that was just our standard practice.
I think that last year we were talking about how many meetings we typically have, and if we had that one, there was one more than we usually have, so we didn't skip, but we got to do 2 from now on.
I think from now on, because we've always had two in June, that seems odd.
And
Sometimes we've even had 3.
Next year's has 2.
Oh, okay.
So it's just this year, so, yeah. Okay, I think that's it. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you. Tried to get you notes from a legislative brunch. Yeah. Nobody was assigned to take them, so no one. So next year it'll be different.